Okay. But you guys will get to know who we are as the show goes on. We are so excited, and we're just going to jump right in with our topics today. So, the first topic, in the form of a question, is divorce ever okay? Is divorce
Mm,
ever okay?
Who wants to take that
mm,
one first?
mm,
Jump right in,
mm,
y'all.
Okay, I'll start. Of course it is.
Mhm. Okay.
There are a number of different reasons why divorce would be okay. I think that of course when it comes to like domestic violence, things like that, I think even emotional abuse, divorce is okay. I think in even some instances where other people may say, well, that's not a reason. Um, I think incompatibility, like if you are in like, if y'all just can't figure it out, if y'all just not compatible, and y'all like having war like every day, then I think that, that's just life sometimes. Like it's, everything is not always permanent. And just because you married somebody doesn't mean that that's what it was meant to, that was meant to happen. I just don't believe that. So,
mm,
Okay.
yeah, I think it's okay sometimes.
Okay.
mhm, mhm,
And
mhm,
ladies, Mrs. Jovo, what do you think?
mhm. I think divorce is okay, but it's not okay. And I'm going to explain my answer. Okay. Divorce is difficult, and in my belief, I think it should be a last resort. I do think that when you're splitting up something, it's in terms of feeling is not okay. I don't think anybody is truly okay or feels okay about divorce. But I do have to agree with Cannon when I think when it starts spilling over into certain things into your life, like your everyday daily what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say happiness, but your day to day life where you're not feeling content, you're not feeling like I'm in a situation where I either feel safe or I feel like my basic needs are being met or I feel like I'm not being, violated, then okay, I think that the discussion for divorce should come up only if you've exhausted some other options. Now, when I say that other options, of course, I'm not talking about like domestic violence or abuse, things of that nature. I think that because those things can put someone's life in danger. But I do believe that divorce can be okay, but not okay in the sense of it's not gonna feel okay. It's not gonna feel comfortable splitting from the familiar. But I think that if it's putting your life at risk, I think that you have to have that difficult conversation about you going your way, your partner going their way. That's how I feel about it.
Okay.
And then two, I think that it depends on what's going on inside of the marriage or inside of of the relationship because for instance, if you're in a situation where there's abuse and neglect, of course, not only is your life in danger, but it might be the lives of your children if you share children, or other family members. There might be some things at stake. So I think that you definitely have to sit down and give it some thought. I tell
Mhm.
everybody all the time when you make these decisions, you have to look at decisions as something that has kind of a trickle effect. It's not
Mhm.
going to only affect you, but it's going to affect everyone around
Definitely, definitely.
you. Hmm.
Right. And Braven, Mrs. aka Mrs. Understanding. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I believe divorce is absolutely okay eventually, but this is provided the man has been properly vetted. You can't just marry anybody. However, it is
Mm.
2021 and you don't get any prize for unnecessary suffering. So, make the move that
Mhm.
you see is fit.
Okay. All
Mhm.
right. Well,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
appreciate that. I have a few questions for you guys. So, what are some things that we can do to prevent divorce then? So, in the case that you all, this is some areas where, you know, or some situations where divorce is what you all say okay. But I think the goal for most people when they get married is to stay married. Contrary to what, men, I think most women enter into marriages with the hope that it will last. Um, what would you say are some things, and all of you ladies are married, what would you say are some things can be done before and during a marriage to make sure that your marriage doesn't come to a divorce?
I'm a big proponent of being flexible and getting counseling for sure, because we're human. Everybody's going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. You got to be able to extend grace and take grace, because sometimes we're harder on ourselves than our partner might be. So I'm always down for counseling, before counseling, premarital counseling, and actual marriage counseling. You're never married too long not to get counseling. You don't know everything.
Yeah. And you're never married too soon to get counseling either, right? I know I've heard a couple people frown upon that. Like when they find out that a newly wed couple has like started counseling, they think, uh-oh, there's trouble on the horizon, you know. But sometimes people are just experiencing challenges, right? They're experiencing challenges and they need help. And from my understanding, those first few years of marriage are unlike every year, following, and they have their own set of challenges and people are getting help. So I just wanted to say that I know a couple people who started counseling and their marriages early on, So it's like, and to me that makes sense, because it's like, why wait until it's like out of hand?
I mean, the thing is that I think that most people need to be in counseling anyway, period, right? Individually. And most people don't go and don't do the work that they have to do to heal childhood trauma, to even really get to know themselves and do all of those things. So of course you're gonna need to do it in a relationship. If you need to do it for your own self, then of course you're gonna need to do it in a relationship. But I was just gonna say that I think that part of the issue or part of the problem is kind of when you because of course nobody goes into a marriage wanting to get a divorce, right? Yeah. But I think the problem play when we kind of want guarantees for stuff, or it's like this is life, right? And in life you don't you can do certain things that you are in control of to kind of mitigate or manage or do whatever you can do in a moment. So I do agree that you should be doing things like making sure you know yourself before you trying to jump into this marriage, making sure that you have some type of understanding of your partner or what you expect and their integrity and like all of these different things. You want to have some type of understanding of. Counseling, all of those things I think are accurate as well. But I think the most important part to remember is that communication is critical. But I think one of the most important things to remember is that there is no guarantee, right? Because I'm sure we can all think about, and I'm not sure what that noise is. But I'm sure we could all think about and remember, well, I'm almost 40. I'm just gonna put my age out there. I'm almost 40, but I remember being 20, 22, 23, 24, 30, whatever, last year, right? I was different all of those times, right? Because the experiences that you have shape you and mold you. So every day you kind of different. So that part is really stuff that you can't really plan or prepare for, right? I think it's important for us to always, and I think that's why we get blindsided a lot of time, because we think that we just be in shock. We be like, how did I get here? And it's like, that's how life goes. It progresses. You know what I mean? Just you have to stay on the post. You kind of got to stay in it the entire time. Because if you ever get on autopilot, you will be all the way somewhere else and don't even know how you ended up there. So I think it's important to always like stay present. I think that's the most important part.
Yes.
So that you staying present and intentional.
Intentional. I love that. I love that. Gail, one of our viewers, says communication is crucial in a marriage. Having the courage to discuss tough topics with a loving heart. So I think she's saying
Mhm.
that's one thing to help prevent divorce. And a couple things
Mhm.
to me about that, the communication part, obviously, but we always say that. People always say that, but there are still so many
Mhm.
divorces. So it makes me just think about that, the fact that, or the possibility that a lot of people are not learning how to communicate.
There you
Um,
go.
and
Mhm.
then another thing that sticks out about Gail's comment is that she says having the courage to discuss. And that's
Mhm.
interesting to me. I've heard people say having the willingness or the openness or the
Mhm.
humility, but she says have the courage. So I find that very
Yes.
interesting. Do you all, what comes to mind when you hear what she wrote?
Oh wow. When you said courage, okay, that took me back to, let's see, year 5 of my marriage. Yes. Sometimes we have to say the things that society or these social rules have told us you're not supposed to say that. I grew up with older people, my grandmothers, and my grandma, she was really big on like formality and there's a way you say this without actually saying it. And see, in marriage, that really doesn't work. You have to really sometimes say the raw truth and be prepared for what comes after that. Because you might be in a situation where you say your truth about something and they're not ready to receive it. And you're going to have to sit with that. They're not ready to receive it, but being able to know that I've spoken my truth, you know. And another thing about communication, a lot of people, and I'm going back to what Ashley Michelle said, um, a lot of people don't know how to communicate. They don't know what effective communication looks like. They don't. I come from a family of my aunts are very assertive yet aggressive women. I'll say that. Very southern, very, we're the planners, we put everything together. They're going to speak what's on their mind. And there's a way to convey what needs to be said effectively with, you'll still get your truth out, but
It's a
you're not,
skill.
yeah, yeah, it's a skill. You're not aggressive to the point where all they can do is focus on the aggression and not focus on the message. You know, and I had to learn that in year 5 of my marriage. My husband is the opposite of me, very reserved, very quiet, and when he has something to say, it's something to say. Like I'm the talker in the relationship. I had to learn how to listen. I had to learn that silent and listen have the same letters. So I had to learn how to do this, sit back and really hear him. You know, I think that's a big thing as well. A lot of people, again, they think they're communicating with each other. They might be doing something, but it might not be effective communication. I just say that, and I had to learn how to effectively communicate. We did the whole thing. We went to therapy, learned about I statements, all of that stuff. And when I tell you that it helps so much, helps so much.
I can imagine that. But so, Javonda, let me ask you this. What would you say to
Hmm.
those people who are like, well, tone doesn't matter? It's the message that matters. What about those people? What would you say?
That's a
What I
lot.
say to those people is what I tell my clients who come in to see me for therapy. How you show up matters. How you show up matters. As much as we don't want to really accept that sometimes, how you show up, it definitely does matter. My mentor, because every therapist has a really great therapist that they see. Shout out to Missy Vaughn. Missy Vaughn told me that from day one when she was training me, you know, how you show up matters. Tone matters. Body language, it matters.
Mhm.
It matters so much. It matters so much. When me and my husband are about to have like a serious conversation, we make sure our daughter is not around one, and we make sure we're in a comfortable space in the house where I feel like I'm going to be heard. He feels he's going to be heard. We either sitting next to each other or across from each other, and we're looking at each other. It all matters, you know. And some people may say, "Oh, you don't have to do all of that." How you show up, it does matter. It definitely does matter. So that's what I would say to those people who say tone does not matter. It does. It absolutely does.
Okay.
Hmm.
Ladies, what do you all think? Everyone else, what do y'all think?
No, I mean, I agree with exactly what she said, and also going back to the comment about having courage. I think that it also means, especially when she say to discuss tough topics.
Hmm.
I think that that also means, you know, sometimes we are not sure how our partners will accept us with our
Mm.
truths. So I think that that's where the fear comes in too when it comes to communication. So sometimes we'll hide things or lie about things or omit things, you know, and stuff like
Hmm.
that because we're afraid of what our partner may do or what our partner may think or how they'll react.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
that definitely breaks down communication as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's what that courage means too, because it's like having the courage to, and also like the trust in your partner. It's like having courage and trust in your partner to
Yes.
be able to accept your truths, like whatever they
Hmm.
are, instead of not giving them the opportunity. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
agree. I think. Oh, sorry, my bad. Go
No, I
ahead.
was gonna say, what about you?
Oh, okay. I just wrote some stuff down. I think the courage part was what stuck out to me the most because normally you hear people say, you know, well, I would go to therapy, but I don't think they want to hear about it. Or every time I bring it up, she want to titter tat me, and you know, well, you did
Hmm.
this, you did that, and that's the courage part on both ends because it's a woman or man, whoever is doing the tit for tat. You have to be able to accept this is what they feel. You got to trust that they're coming in good faith. They have good intentions. This is just what they feel. It's not an attack. It's not, well, you didn't take the garbage out last week. You just have to take it in.
Hmm.
Okay. You
Hmm.
know, and then the other way, that's why I said counseling is so important because it teaches you how you do these things. But if you have a pattern of
Yes.
blowing up and throwing plates and throwing cups, ain't nobody gonna talk to you about nothing outside of just
Mm-mm.
relationships. You know, so
Mm-mm.
it's a part of life in general.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Um, Misunderstanding is right. She hit the nail on the head. And I think, well, you ladies on the panel, you know how I feel about therapy because that's what I do for a living. Skill sets are so important. I think the way that I look at therapy is how we kind of chime in on social media when somebody in our community passes away and there's no insurance policy and there's no preparation, there is no plans. And then we see these GoFundMe accounts, and then it's like, y'all, we need to better prepare ourselves. It's the same thing with marriage and relationships. We need to better prepare ourselves. I love what Candace said about knowing thyself in the beginning. For me, being a wife meant for me, I had to confront my ego and my personality and really tap into my inner self because that's what my femininity was. I had to really, 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 okay, counter my personality and my ego. We're all born with one, it develops, that's where our habits, certain things that we pick up along life, that's where they live. But deep down inside at the core of us, there's an inner self that has to be ignited. And I had to learn how to ignite that person. That all started with me going to therapy by myself before I became a wife. So I can figure out what kind of woman I am because a lot of women, and a lot of women in our community, we enter these relationships, we don't know who we are. We know we want him, we know we want to take care of him, we know we want to be a wife, we want to be a mom. But then it's like I had to answer the question, who is Javonda after all of that? Who is this wife after all of that? And I had to go individually before and after. Before to find out who I was, and after to make sure I don't lose herself in this wife, mom, therapist, friend, sister, cousin person, who is things to everybody. So I totally misunderstanding hit the nail on the head. We have to prepare. We got to
Mm-hmm.
prepare ourselves. We can't go into something blinded. Just like my analogy I used a few minutes ago. Somebody dies in the family, no insurance policy, no burial fund, no nothing. People just scattered.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. We get scattered in these divorce in these marriages, and then we cry out divorce, and it's like, well, you really prepared though. Did you
Mm-hmm.
manage your expectations?
Yeah.
You know.
And that's one
Mhm.
thing I think, as a single woman, when
Mhm.
people say, "Oh, you're not married, you shouldn't even be talking about marriage," or you don't
Mm.
opinion because you're not married. Now, obviously, I
Mm.
don't have the perspective that a married woman would have, but I think that before we get married, we should be having something to say. We should be having
Mhm.
some idea of marriage and what it's about, what a woman's role is, what a man's role is, how to keep it together. We can't wait until we walk down the aisle to start figuring it out. I think that
Mm.
preparation comes way before you get married.
Mhm.
And so what you were saying just makes me think about that. Even as a single person, you should be thinking and learning, gleaning from married women, married men about what marriage is all about. So you have something so that you're going into it with something. We prepare ourselves for everything else. So I
Mhm.
think that we should be preparing. And I cannot stand, I despise when people make comments like that. Oh, well, you're not married, you don't have nothing to say. Or it's like, well, maybe that's why you're struggling in your marriage, because before you got married, you didn't think about these things. You didn't have any
Mm.
experience with them. It's like, no,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
you too late once you already have walked down the aisle and you're trying to just now figure it out.
Well, I think the
Exactly.
problem is that a lot of times people don't have those in-depth conversations. That what I've recognized and what I noticed a lot is that I think a lot of people are in love and excited about the idea of marriage, or the idea of getting married, or having a wedding, or having a husband, or having a wife, right? Or like you said, having kids. But I'm not, I feel like there's a lot more conversation, maybe because it's a lot more universal when it comes to like prepping, like to be a parent, right? People gonna tell you, they're gonna be like, this is parenting is like this. It's like they got whole programs trying to keep teenagers from having kids, and you carry the fake baby around, and like all of these different things. People are constantly telling you, like, hey, I mean, kids cute. They real cute, but hey, you got they bad. You got to change their diaper. They got their own little person. That like they tell you all of these things. People don't really talk like that too much when it comes to marriage. Like people talking a lot of platitudes, stuff like that usually. And then I think people, they make marriage seem more like that's why I don't ever like to look at it like a goal. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay, I went to school. Okay, I got this career that I'm doing this, or I wanted to get a puppy. Like those things are kind of goals. But the reason why I don't look at marriage as a goal is because I think that the work and the commitment that is required for it, I think it's something that some people that you may never get, right? But I feel like when you try to fit square pegs into round holes, then that's when you have more problems, because you already have this idea like, okay, I have a goal to get married. So now what you are doing is actively finding somebody to put in that spot for that marriage you want, as opposed to finding somebody and saying, I could see myself working with this person and spending my life with this person and putting in the work with this person. It's the other way around. It's like, well, I want a husband, so let me find someone who could be a husband, right? It's like, I think that's why people run into issues. It's like, you got to be okay with maybe you won't find a husband, right? You know what I mean? Like, be okay with it.
I
Be
like to tell
for
women
a
when they
partner, right? And then the marriage comes after you find the partner.
I like to tell women they're ready to get married, you should be ready to work, because therapy is the easy part. Putting it into practice, that's the hard part. Not talking back, sitting there, yes, sir, you absolutely right. I am listening and I am prepared. That's the hard part.
Who do that? No.
That's what you're doing. You're doing active listening. But that's the hard part. People think you're going to walk down the aisle and be in love for the rest of your life. But like I said, you both humans. Y'all going to both make mistakes. You got to have grace. Like they said, courage, all of that. And you sure going to have to, put some practice in it. You got to work. This ain't a fairy tale. This
yeah, and all those people that was, at the wedding, throwing rice and crying, and everybody taking pictures and like mama happy, right? Everybody happy, my baby Mary, everybody, looking at you. They are like, "Ooh, she got a husband." They don't gotta be in that house every day in that relationship. You do. So that's the important part, not what it looks like for everybody else.
Exactly.
Okay. So I do want to wrap this topic up, but I want to close out with just kind of like a recap of what we said. But even before I do that, I did want to go back to what you were saying, Cannon, about, marriage shouldn't necessarily be a goal. And I get what you were saying by it, but I do think that, it's okay to desire that. And I think that women should be intentional about marriage. And it's okay to say, I want to be married. You could be single, at the dollar bill and still say, you know what? Yeah, I want to be married.
Okay, well, I have a question for you with that.
Yeah.
When you say, okay, so if you don't have a person, right, or this partner or this idea of what even this marriage is going to look like, what is the desire to be married to accomplish? Like, if you're a one and you're just like, I want to be married in order to get what? Like, what is it you're looking to receive?
So I think that, you got to have an understanding of what you think marriage is, like, and what it actually is. I'm a Christian woman. So my conception of it comes from the Bible, and I pick up things from other Christian people who are married and some who are not married, but are aspiring to be married. And so, that's my understanding that's where my understanding comes from. And I think that God has given marriage a purpose, and obviously that purpose has to do with growing his kingdom, raising young people who will believe in him,
So you desire to be married, to have children,
to have a family, and for me as a woman, for companionship, for me. Now, I understand that men don't necessarily marry for companionship. That's what I'm gathering from men in general, is that they marry for legacy. They marry for, children, and some men marry to have a helpmate, but as a woman, I think I naturally would like to be married for companionship,
Okay.
And so I don't see anything wrong with saying, you know what, I do want that for myself.
Right. So then this is the question that I say. So so basically you're desiring to have companionship, right? Like, it's not necessarily like, oh, I desire to be married, but you feel like marriage is what will give you that companionship.
Yeah.
That's kind of what therein lies is kind of what I'm saying about the desire to be like, I want to be married. And that's why I think we can set ourselves up, right? A lot of times, because getting married is not going to guarantee you companionship. You see what I mean? So it's like, if you trying to get married or you going to have seasons where ain't going to be no companionship. And then now you're going to get a divorce because now you don't have that companionship no more. So that's what I'm like, what do you want to get married for? That's kind of what I mean about, like, I never wanted to get married. Like, I never, and I don't mean didn't want to get married like I was adverse to getting married. But I mean, I didn't have anyone that I wanted to go through all of that with. So why am I just sitting here like, I want to get married for what? Like, for what things? You know what I mean? I think that's how you kind of set yourself up, because once you get in that marriage, it's just not going to always be companionship. It might not never be companionship. Like, y'all may have two totally different ways of existing, right? That you realize once you get into the nitty gritty, or you've been married for 4 years, 5 years, and y'all don't even know each other sometimes, right? Because y'all may be growing at different paces and things like that. But if that's your desire to be like, okay, once I get married, I'm going to have companionship. That's why I feel like we get messed up at, right? Because I just don't think that marriage gives you that. Like, I think marriage gives you work. And I think, I think that marriage gives you, it does give you someone that you should share like common goals and things with. But that's pretty much it. I feel like outside of that, all of the other stuff is stuff that that you kind of putting together as you go along. Like, I don't feel like marriage guarantees any of those things. It guarantees that you have a person that has the title, right? That's with you. Like, that's what it does. Outside of that, I think all the other stuff that we desire, it doesn't guarantee that.
Well,
and
that brings me back to God, the purpose of marriage and God's eyes, and that to me is really just to grow His kingdom. Like, why you get married is individual. Everybody gets married for a different reason, and you're right. For instance, that I may be. Darren says marriage gives you chores. I do desire marriage for companionship, but I also know there are a lot of married women who don't have companionship. There are a lot of lonely married women. So one person could say, well, that's not a good reason to get married. But, everybody has different reasons for why they want to get married. Some people want to get married for financial stability. Some people get married for things that we would say are silly reasons to get married or unwise reasons to get married, being, oh, I just need a man. I just want a ring. I just want to say I'm married. They don't always vocalize it that way, but a lot of times that's what it is. So I think that, we all have different motivations for wanting to get married. That's very individual. But for me, I think about the overall purpose of marriage and what it was designed for. And so I think that, some people might have that goal to be married. But I brought that up, Cannon, only just to kind of bring that out and bring out what you were trying to say, which is that, just don't make it like a check mark. Like, oh, I just need to be married. You got to think about what all comes with that. And I think sometimes a lot of women don't do that. They're not thinking about that. They're just thinking about, oh, I need my ring. I got my ring. And it's validation in this society. It's validation for women to say, oh, I'm married, So I just wanted to say that, like, I think the point, and maybe you disagree, but I think the point is that it's okay to have to desire that, but you don't want it to be a goal that you just check off. Like,
I agree. Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay. So we have been on this topic for a little longer than I thought we would. Do you mind wrapping up for me, Raven? Just like some thoughts and takeaways really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I kept some notes. I think altogether we should be flexible. Change. Everybody's going to change. I know, Candy, you mentioned about people being different when they were younger and then they get older. But that's why flexibility is so important, because nobody's going to be the same. Whether you get married at 30 and then they change at 50, they still change. So therapy is important. Premarital therapy and therapy while in marriage is important. And grace.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. All right. Let's go ahead to our next topic. The next topic may ruffle some feathers. But the question is sexual liberation really liberating?
Oh, let's ruffle some feathers.
Is sexual liberation really liberating?
No, I actually think this is a very multifaceted, layered conversation that a lot of times I think doesn't get that treatment when it's discussed. The reason why I say that is because first we have to define sexual liberation, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that in a lot of the conversations I hear is seen as, oh, you just want to go sleep with everybody. Like, oh, so now you're liberated, right? I don't look at it like that. And I don't think that that's what it is. I didn't take time to go look up the actual definition. I was going to, but I don't want to. I'm just going to tell you what I think, what it is in my opinion, and why I think that it is liberating if it's actual sexual liberation. What I was going to say is that I know for a fact that us as girls in this society, especially as Black girls, mm-hmm. I don't know what be happening in other households and communities, but I know what happened in households and communities y'all grew up in, right? that we are shamed a lot. We're shamed for our bodies. We're shamed for any type of sexuality, any type of anything that is exhibited. We're shamed from a young age. Like as soon as our bodies start to develop, oh, go do this, oh, go do that. We talked about it in a certain way, like, oh, she fast or she grown and all of these other things. So I think we are taught from a very young age to be ashamed of our bodies, to be ashamed of being sexual or having sexual feelings, right? We're told that we, that one thing that I feel like was kind of instilled in me early that took me a long time to really work through is that like boys are the ones who want sex, right? Never one time, give me 1 second. Never one time was I ever told, like, you're going to want to have sex or you're going to have these. It was all about, don't let the boys do this, right? Boys are after this. And I feel like that comes as a shock to you growing up and hitting puberty and stuff like that. And you start to feel like it's something wrong with you because you like, well, I thought the boys the ones supposed to want it. What's going on around here? And I think that that's what starts all of those problems. So when I look at sexual liberation, I just look at it as being in touch with your desires, right? What you want, having autonomy in your choices and your decisions, and not having shame about your choices and decisions. Like one thing that stuck out to me for so many years is I remember it was in the news for a minute, and it was this school that had a sex education program, and it may have been multiple schools, I don't know, but it had this sex education program. And what they did was in order to teach the girls about celibacy or something like that, they passed around a stick of gum. They passed they passed around the stick of chewing gum around the classroom. And once it got like to the last person, they got like this little, nasty piece of gum with all the lint stuck to it and all of this. And basically they told the girls like, yeah, this is you. After you, the more you do XYZ, you're degraded now. This is like this is what we tell girls. You know what I mean? So that's what I think about. That's what I mean in regards to sexual liberation, like being free from that concept that we're somehow less than because of a sexual experience or sexual desire, anything like that. We are the ones who are diminished. Like our whole humanity is diminished because of sex. Men are not. Men could be they're gonna be the same. They're the same person. They viewed as the same. Some of them even get more credit and more esteem, in the community for having sex or their sexual experience or prowess. But we are like our whole being is diminished and disrespected. So that's what I think when I think of sexual liberation, just letting all that stuff go out the window and really getting more in touch with what you want, who you are, and being grounded in that.
So does sexual liberation, is a woman sexually liberated by her own doing, or is it something that society allows?
No, I think that she has to be sexually liberated by her own doing. See, because if you're just gonna equate having a lot of sexual partners to sexual liberation, then I just don't think that that's what it is, right? Because if you're in your mind, you're like, oh, I could just have all this sex and that's gonna make, that could be damaging too, depending on what your goal is, what you're trying to achieve. If you out here looking for love, looking for whatever, then that's a problem. So it really comes from yourself. That's what I mean. Like you have to be really grounded in who you are, and you really have to be aware of the choices that you're making and why you're making those choices. Like I say, if you just out here with no rhyme or reason and you out here looking for comfort or looking for this or looking for that, that's not sexual liberation. Right? Sexual liberation is more along the lines of, I know who I am. I'm grounded in it. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm not doing that.
So where does the diminishing come from? And I see what you're talking about. Like in our society, women have certain associations to them when they decide to have sex versus when a man does. So if liberation comes from within, then why does it matter what other people think?
It's not necessarily about other people think, but it's what other people think affects the way that we see ourselves. Like that's the problem. And if you're not aware of that, and if you never challenge that, then it never changes. Like, even if we look at, this may seem like it has nothing to do with it, but even if we look at things like horror movie tropes, right? Who's the first person to die in a horror movie? The female who had sex, or who was the slutty one, or whatever. You know, I'm saying it's ingrained in so many things. And if you aren't aware of how that outward thing affects you internally, then you're never going to change it. You're not going to get that from on the inside, because you don't even know that it's affecting you, because you're not aware of it. So I think that you have to be aware of how those things affect you, and that's how you protect yourself and how you kind of choose on your own.
Okay. So liberation in your eyes comes more so from within. And you notice that people see you a certain way, but you feel like you need to be liberated from their opinions and what they think about you. That's what you're saying.
I suppose to a certain extent. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess so.
No right or wrong. I'm just getting your opinion. Make sure I understand. All right. What do you ladies think? What do you think, Mrs. Josiah? What do you think?
I was taking some notes. For me, sexual liberation, you got to go back, because and I like how Cannon kind of took us back to what some of us were taught as young women, because I was taught some of that same stuff. Trauma is passed down. And what I like to really explain to people is that when a person has a traumatic experience, depending upon that type of experience, especially a sexual experience, where there has been assault or rape or molestation or abuse, there's a lot of guilt and shame associated with something like that. So trauma is passed down. I know several women that I've come in contact with, whether it be friends or family, they have been touched inappropriately, or they've been groped, or they've had early sexual experiences. Um, and they normalize that trauma by saying stuff like, you know, why are you the only girl over there? Why are you hanging out with all those boys? Or why is your shirt like that? Or why are those shorts like that? Why are those pants like that? Or you can't wear those because you're too shapely. And I remember hearing some of these things like as a little girl and not really understanding what that actually means, other than, okay, my grandma said that, so I got to do what she tells me to do. So for me, sexual liberation means the freedom to know and understand sex, period. Unfortunately, in our community, a lot of us who think we know sex and know about sex, we don't know. We don't know. We don't know what sex is. We know that basic education, possibly if somebody broke it down to us. But terms like orgasm, terms like lust and what that really means, or attraction, or intimacy versus sex, or foreplay. These are words that, because some of our family members, friends, people who raised us had traumatic experiences, we can't freely discuss these things growing up. Now, I know it was like that for my household. I'm not saying it's like that for everybody, but I know what it was like for me. And everything that I thought or that I knew about sex at a certain age, I went to my friends and asked them, hey, what does this mean? And what does that mean? So for me, sexual liberation is freedom to know what sex is. I think that's what people are looking for. Freedom to know that pleasure of what it is.
Okay.
Sometimes I think they're not prepared with everything else that comes with it. Like, okay, I'm attracted to that person. Do I necessarily have to sleep with them? Or can I sleep with this person, and that person all at the same time? They're questioning themselves. So I think that the liberation part is actually the freedom to ask questions, the freedom to know, what it actually means to be liberated sexually.
Okay.
You know, I agree with Cannon totally that it's not about this freedom to just kind of what I call run amok. I don't think it's that. I think it's just freedom to ask the questions and actually have the discussion. Because I think people know things and they don't think they know what they're really getting into. The other thing that I wrote down was that men and women are different. You know, it's like they're taught sexual liberation from the time their member it looks like they're attracted to something, and then it's like, okay, it's normal, buddy. And for us, it's girl, you can't say that, or girl, you can't think that, you know. So I think it just stems back to some of this, the product of trauma that's just been passed down to us. That okay, this happened to me with this man, so this is how you have to deal with men around you when you haven't had that experience, but because mama, grandma, great grandma, auntie, sister, whoever had it, then we all got to conduct ourselves like that. So that's how I see it. My definition would be just, the freedom to know and to understand sex.
Okay.
You know. Hmm.
Okay.
Well, I
And
looked up the definition while we were all just sitting here. And we're all pretty much on point. It's just the changing of the old sexual norms and the, relationships we used to have. And I think it's important that you brought up, Miss Jo, trauma, because what we were taught, or what I was taught in the Southern area by my older generation of women, my grandmothers, great grandmothers, was that women, good girls didn't do certain things, regardless if you were married or not. You don't do those things. That's for bad girls. Those are for ladies of the night. That's for when you want to go get a dirty woman. Do that with her. But, women like dirty stuff too, like you said, Kim. And what if I'm not a good girl? Then what? Then you're denying yourself, like you said, Michelle, based off somebody else's possible trauma, because they could have been traumatized and just trying to say, well, he did that to me because I was bad, so you're not going to do that ever in your life. Well, that's not the case, So I think it's important for couples to explore themselves. And I also think that's why a lot of women haven't reached their happy place, because too many women over 40 that ain't reached their happy place.
Yeah.
So, I think couples should take that time. It's gonna be fumbling. It's not gonna be an A+ every time. You're gonna get a D tonight. Next week it might be an A+. Tomorrow might be an F. That's part of the learning process. That's why grace is so important. That's why, as the person mentioned before, courage is important, because it's some wives that may not be as vanilla as their husband, or their husbands might be, looking for a little more spice from their wife. So that's the part of communicating. That's the courage you need.
I want to add something to that too, real quick. And this goes back to Raven, what you were saying about the spice, and women deserve. We like spice. We want spice. We deserve something. Now the virtue part of it, because I do have Christian values and virtue when it does come to sex. But I do question sometimes, what is it virtue, Javonda? And I think most of it was, or was it what was filled in my head as a teenager or as a preteen? Don't bring no babies around here. Don't be chasing after these little boys. They ain't got nothing for you. And the list goes on. I was petrified of sex for a long time, like terrified, like just as a teenager, like walking around in high school, looking at everybody else like, y'all gonna get in trouble because we all know what you're doing. And I'm too scary to do that because I don't want kids. I'm telling you, and that goes back to that trauma. But I had to learn on my own, and I had to learn from other women that if I see something that I like in a man, physical attraction or something, it's okay to validate that feeling. It's okay to say, he's good looking, he's fine, or he's this or that. It's okay to say that. I am a human. I'm going to say things like that.
Yeah.
I think the virtue for me came in with how many people am I willing to share this experience with in my life.
Right.
And that was just for me. But I think that ignoring carnal desire, like not acknowledging it, I think we need to teach something different, because what we're teaching the kids is, you can't talk to me. You can't talk to me about that. And then if they're not talking to us, y'all know they're talking to other people. I did it. They're talking to other people, and then they're confused. And then you got those two types of people. Well, when I'm confused, I want to find out for myself.
And that's how they get taken advantage of.
That's
there
true.
You go.
That's exactly how they get taken advantage of. But I like one of the comments Gail said that society has placed the majority of the burden and responsibility on women. She said that's back to Adam and Eve. Eve was blamed for everything. And I mean, that's facts though, right? Like the responsibility put on us. But I think that it does have the it also has the ability to backfire to a certain extent, right? Because if you're teaching girls that sexual experiences or sexual or anything that they've done sexually or anything sexual that happened diminishes them in some way, right? Or makes them less, then just like you brought up when you said about trauma and different things like that that happen to girls when they're younger, that's what can turn a girl to not value herself, because if something happened to her or something like that, then now she's diminished in her mind because you instilling in them that this sexual activity, now you less than, you know, you ain't your value is degraded, right?
Yeah.
So now if something happens to me, now what value do I have? Now you telling me that all my value is in this. So now that this happened, I have no value. So what difference does it make now at this point? I might as well just whatever. So I think that's the problem that we run into when we are doing that. And I think that it does have a lot to do with how we socialize. I think that there are some minor differences in men and women when it comes to that, but I think the majority of those differences are ingrained in us from childhood. Just like you said, because I always watched it. Like I say, the boys was allowed to just be as free. The boys I basically told, you gonna want to do it. A man gonna be a man. You gonna like that. Hey, they just being a boy. Look at boys will be boys, right? And so they're allowed to explore things in a way that we're not. And to me, it also don't add up. It don't match. If you got the girls, you over here telling them they got to guard it with their life, and you telling the boys they got to go and sneak and manipulate and do whatever they can to try to get it out of you. What are we doing?
It's great for like unhealthy relationships. I can definitely
very much, very much so.
Like men are like on the prowl, and women feel like they're being cheated or played, and you know, and so now there's like a lot of distrust on women's part, but also on men's too, because they're like, wait a minute, you trying to act like this isn't what you want, but it really is. So it just makes for very unhealthy relationships. But I wanted to say, so right now, like we're all agreeing though that sexual liberation is not just hooking up with a bunch of people, you know, not hooking up with just anybody. I think Ken is saying it's the freedom to just be able to talk about it and be able to be honest about the fact that as women, we have desires too.
Free from sexual hangups, pretty much.
Yes. And then I know, Javonda, you're saying it's the freedom of kind of the same thing, right? Being able
to just knowing.
Just knowing. This is my body.
Knowing my body, what I like, what I don't like, and being able to talk about it. Because I think the other part of this too is that women are so censored on certain things. Like it's, oh, you're a woman. You can't, you can't say that. You can't, especially here in the South. Let me just say that. We're so censored. And it's not that talking about it is, because like I said, I am a Christian. I'm teaching my daughter about virtue, but I want her to not judge. Like it's more to us than just what we have to offer in the bedroom. That's just a small part of who we are as a person. Sex is not this thing. We got jobs, we got careers.
Men get to exist outside of that, and that be a small part of who they are.
So I think that it's important that we get to, it's not this big thing that if we talk about it, the world gonna blow up. And that's what I've had to say to girls that I've mentored before. I have these conversations with, a couple of my nieces that it's normal for you to have sexual desires. It's normal for you to talk about this. It's not normal to think that you're not supposed to talk about this, and we're human. If I cut a man and I cut a woman, we both gonna bleed. Okay? If I cut my hand, I cut his hand, we both gonna bleed. So what does that tell you? We all have kind of these physical desires, and women are just so sensitive on what they can talk about. We can talk about it. It's okay. Nothing bad is going to come up in conversation. And I think that's the message that we pass along to little girls, that we can talk about it. We pass along to our teenage girls. Now, how they choose to deal and operate in their sexual liberation, that's based on their personal choices and decisions. All we can do is say these are the consequences. These are the consequences. You
Yeah.
know,
And I
and
wanted to
consequences,
address,
as you know, they're both positive, negative,
yeah,
and in some situations good or bad. So
yeah. And I wanted to
Mhm.
address that, like because we've been talking about what is liberation, but I do want to address like, is sexual liberation really liberating? And obviously, we had to answer that question with the way you guys
Mhm.
are explaining it. It sounds liberating, but there are other ways that we see, especially in our society today, that I don't think are as liberating. So I want to talk about that, but I want to hear from Raven first. What do you think, Raven?
I think, yeah, I don't think sexual liberation has anything to do with promiscuity. I think it's kind of painted like, you got a hot girl, summer it up, but I want to drive in the point that you can explore your partner and you guys can reach your happy places without doing everybody. You guys can just do that together, buy all the toys you want to buy, all the stuff you want to do, explore each other, but you don't have to explore everybody in the community.
Yeah. So, and I love that. I can relate a little bit. I grew up in a very Christian home, very traditional. Um, and my mom didn't, and I thank God for what she instilled in me. Um, but she did have a very, I hate to say negative, but like a shame was attached to sex. So for a long time, until recently, I definitely saw my worth tied to my virginity. And now I still think that our value as women does have to do with what we choose to do with our bodies. Like that's me, that's just me. I think that just how we are careful with what we put on our hair and what, you know, who we loan out our purse to, or who we let borrow our shoes, or who we let get in our car. I think we need to be particular about who we let in our bodies.
But see, I think that that's universal, though. I think that's for men and women. I mean, it's too much stuff
I
going on out here.
I agree. But what I'm saying is absolutely, I completely agree with that. But what I'm saying is that I think that there is we have to teach women to value, or our young girls to value ourselves. But sex is not shameful. And that's what I'm trying to say. And so for a long time, because, it seems like we either grow up in like on one extreme or the other. Like we're either like we're not getting hardly any instruction on sex, or we're getting so much, but it's like in like a real kind of confining, kind of detrimental way, which can be problematic in your relationships as you get older, especially dealing with men who have a lot of experience, right? Like it could be problematic if you attach sex to being like to shame. And so my mom never really told me to wait until I was married, but everything that she said to me about sex and the way that she kind of spoke about it when it came up was communicated to me that you shouldn't be having sex, unless he's your husband, and it's shameful if you do. So I had to kind of bear with that within myself. So I think that that liberation does come with understanding that women, girls are going to have feelings, and we should be able to talk about them. And it's okay for us to make a choice to, with our bodies, of what we have to do or what we should do, but here are the consequences. That's liberation to me. So I like you guys bringing that up. I don't want to share too much about my story, but I know what it can be like as you get older and you're trying to have relationships or a relationship with a man, and you have that way of thinking about sex. Like it can be problematic.
Right.
I wanted to bring back though to the point of like, is it really liberating? I think in the way that we described it is very liberating. Unfortunately, though, I feel like in our society, a lot of they haven't been taught some of the things that you guys are saying. Like all they've been taught is don't have sex. That's it. That's all they've been taught. They haven't been taught, oh, this is natural, this is normal. They haven't been taught, but this is your body, you decide. They haven't been taught, you still have to be careful. They haven't been taught about the fact that men and women see sex. You might lay down with somebody and you think you about to marry him, and he like, oh, I hope she don't call me tomorrow. Like, men and women see sex differently, and I think a lot of women really get hurt and not understanding that. They get into relationships or they start dating somebody and they think, oh, now I'm gonna sleep with him, he'll love me more, I'm his girl now. And I think that is liberating.
Well,
I think it's not liberating, because what happens is you have a whole generation of women who are hurting physically. So they're hurting spiritually because now they've been, they just ready to be free. They haven't really been taught those consequences, the spiritual consequences, the natural consequences of deciding, okay, I do want to have sex with this person, or in that person, in that person, in that person. It builds a lot of baggage. It builds a lot of emotional baggage. And so that is not liberating to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of that still goes hand in hand with, and I'm sorry I'm making all these faces. My husband is acting a total fool in the comment section. But he wasn't making faces at you, Darwin Hill. I'm just looking like,
oh. Your husband is Darwin.
Yeah. He putting our business in the street. Whatever. Stop. But anyway, no, what I was gonna say is I think that all of that still goes hand in hand when you say like men and women look at sex differently, right? I still think a lot of that boils down to the way we are socialized, and therein lies the problem, right? Because one of the reasons why I feel like girls are more likely or so gung-ho to feel like they have some type of connection or something with a man that they're sleeping with or willing to do sexual things with is because they're told otherwise they are, bad names, right? If they don't even trick themselves into be like, well, he cares about me. Well, this is okay because he loves me. So it's okay, right? Like they're curious themselves. They have desires themselves. They want to test out things themselves, but they can't just be like, okay, this guy don't care about me at all. I just want to try this out, because otherwise then they're what? They're the bad names, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do girls have that experience when they're young? Is that what they want though?
Yes, girls hit puberty just like boys hit puberty. But that's why I say therein lies the problem. And then also therein lies the problem of why I think there is a disconnect when it comes to sex and things like that. Even when you have conversations around consent, right? And different things like that, I feel like all of that causes the problem. Because I distinctly remember, right, being younger, they playing what? Catch a girl, kiss a girl. They you gotta play hard to get, right? Because if you too easy, then you're going to be the problem, right? So you got to, no, I don't really, but you like kind of peeking, like you're going to keep trying. And so what I'm saying is that I feel like a lot of these conversations we don't have, but that's what actually puts, I feel like, kids in those types of situations when it comes to consent and different things like that, because you're teaching girls, if you are too forward, if you are too open, if you are too whatever, you are a little slut bag, right? So now you have to play chase. You have to pretend like you don't want you have to make this boy your boyfriend. He have to love you in order to do, you know what I'm saying? We telling them all of these things, and that's why you run into those problems.
Okay. So
I feel
think that naturally a man and a woman, when they lay down together, have some type of emotional connection. You don't think that's natural? You think that that's more like a social construction?
I know for a fact that it's not natural. For a fact, a personal fact, that just because you sleep with somebody, you do not have to have any feelings for them before or afterwards. You can never
right.
As a woman, you can never talk to them again. And never think about them again. You can forget that they exist.
Okay. So why then are so many women like so emotionally attached?
I literally just told you, because what I feel like is that a lot of times, most of us, in a lot of instances, tell ourselves, like even when you look at relationships, right? And it's like the dudes, the boys already know they pretty much got to lie to the girl and be like, yeah, you're my girlfriend, I love you. And the girls, what we have to accept those things to tell ourselves that we're a good girl. You see what I'm saying? I'm a good girl because he loves me, because he's my boyfriend. So I can do these sexual things and still be a good girl, because at least this is with somebody who loves me and who's my boyfriend and all of these other things. And and we have to tell ourselves that so that we don't feel the shame as much, right? So that we can feel like, well, at least he loved me, you know? And so I think that that's what happens.
Okay, so you think it's socially kind of constructed, and okay, that's an interesting perspective. I have never heard that. It's an interesting perspective that it, that is something that girls kind of adopt because of what they've been hearing.
Yeah, like my husband just said in the comments, Disney did it. I agree. Like, you get those fairy tales, you get all of it. It's what girls are constantly told. I just literally don't think we just naturally grow up and be like, oh, I'm just so emotional and you be attached to this. Like, I don't see it. I think a lot of it comes from how we're socialized and the things that are ingrained in us and what we're told. Prince Charming,
I think it's socialized within a marriage as well, to piggyback off of that, because a lot of people watch a lot of romantic comedies and you assume that you're going to knock the stuff off the counter and get it in. No.
No, you're not.
You're going to leave all your stuff as it is, where it is.
Exactly.
And then that turns into men saying their women are not initiating enough, because if women are told you're not supposed to be doing it, why would I initiate something I'm not supposed to be doing? What? No, I'm a good girl.
Because he's supposed to be the aggressor. Yeah.
You're supposed to be ravishing me, okay? I'm not supposed to be that kind of girl. You're supposed to come get me. So then men are thinking they're not wanted. They're thinking they're not sexually attractive. And the whole time she's like, well, you're not doing what they did on Lifetime. It's the whole sexual liberation thing. It's more than just hot girl summer, and not to just keep harping on that, because that's what a lot of people bring it up, but it's more than that. It's about, those are needs. Y'all got to meet each other's needs. And one way
it's definitely more than that. And let me just say this, because I'm agreeing with a lot of what Cannon and misunderstanding what you're saying. Let me just say this too. We got to start telling the kids all of the consequences that come along with sex. Period. There are some guys out there. Who they don't want the woman who has been passed around. Everybody has an idea of what they like and what they don't like. And now this is where I hold some sisters accountable. Don't get mad if you run into the guy who says, I can't even do it, sis, because you've been here, there, and everywhere. Don't get mad if that's what he likes. He prefers a woman who hasn't been there and everywhere. We can't get mad because he's telling you, and I see your husband in the comments. Yeah, Mr. Dark, they don't want that. I grew up in Middle Georgia. The men I grew up with, country boys. They want that woman to, rip off his clothes. They want to see that side of you when y'all at his house, your house, behind closed doors, and when you're married and your wife. They want to see that part of you in the bedroom. When they start hearing about that part of you all in the street from like the person he working next to, or the guy he went to high school with, or the guy he just met here and there, for some men, it's a turnoff. Society is being hard on men by telling them, well, that shouldn't matter. You should still want a wife her anyway. You can't tell people what they should and should not like.
I don't think society tells men that. I think those same men are the ones who are actually here, there, and everywhere, and they don't consider what they're doing. But then they got all this criteria when you didn't heard about him with Susie, everybody all around the corner, but you ain't supposed to care about that. That's not supposed to matter to you as a woman. As a matter of fact, it's supposed to have the opposite effect. He's supposed to be more attractive now. Like, ooh, he's been with all of these people. Oh, so I don't think men are told that. I think men are well within their rights to be like, oh no, you should have a girl that has a clean, squeaky record. I mean, you could have whatever kind of track record out here. You can do whatever you want, but she needs to be chaste in public.
Because some of the same decisiveness that you talked about earlier with the women, right? So where I'm from, the boys are told at an early age, oh, go out there, chase and sow your royal oats or whatever you want to call it. Get out there and get it. And then when they get to a certain age, here come mama and grandma and auntie now. Let me introduce you to this child right here. She's nice and wholesome. She ain't really been with nobody. It's time for you to get married and have some kids. It's confusing because you just told the boy a year or two ago to run him up. You know, you just told him to run him up. Now you're telling him he need to settle down and think about legacy and think about family. Don't go with the girl you run him up with, even though we told you to run him up earlier. Go with this girl over here. It's confusing.
And it doesn't match. It doesn't match because I think I saw a meme before. What my husband said, he said it's mostly insecurity from a man because they don't want to hear about one, and you can have 50. They don't hear that one name.
I think I'm a little bit old school with this, and maybe that's still a little bit of my mama in me. I agree that there's a double standard, and I don't applaud promiscuity in men or women. I think men should also be particular about who they lay down with. However, I do value a woman saying, you know what, my body is not for everybody, because it's just not. The things that we value, we don't let everybody have. We don't let everybody see. We don't.
But I look at men the same way. I'm like, dude, I don't want no. I don't mean.
And I agree. And I agree. I don't either. And I hate that our society is like that. I hate that our society makes it okay for men and not okay for women. Here's my thing. Like I was abstinent until 33 years old. Okay, I didn't want a man that had been around the block. I didn't want that. That was so unattractive to me. I remember a guy I was out on a date with, cool guy and everything. He seemed to really be into me. He told me that he had had sex with 300 women. Okay. Now that is an extreme, right?
I'm sorry for my face.
I was done right there, and it's like there are men who really take pride in that, right? They take pride in having a whole lot of different women, but then they want the girl who doesn't have a lot of experience. But from my eyes, as the girl who don't have a lot of experience, I'm like, I don't want that. That's not hot. And I question your judgment, So I'm with you that there's a double standard. But let's be clear. I don't push for women to be like, girl, yeah, go get him, go get him, go get him. I appreciate your perspective, Cannon, that you were talking about the, like, in terms of there being a social construction that makes women think that there's an emotional attachment. That's something that I will think about on my own, think more and delve more into. But at the end of the day, our bodies are a temple. So I do think that we have to remember to push the idea that, yeah, it's your body. You should love it. You should explore it. You should talk about it, and you should have sex and you should enjoy sex. But I do think we have to be careful with telling like young girls and women, like, you know what, this is still your body. It's where you live.
And boys.
And boys as well, of course.
Like I say, all those consequences run both ways. They run both ways.
Well, I mean, let me just say this. They should run both ways. They absolutely should. But they don't always run both ways. And that's just the reality of our world. Like, and I'm like Ashley, my big mama Ward is for to come in now, because in a perfect world, all the consequences would be so, they would be right here on the same level. And we're teaching and they're making guided decisions about sex. But in the world that we live in, some of these consequences are not the same for men and for women. And that's kind of, unfortunately, I'm teaching the young people in my life and those that I mentor too, that the world has some harsh realities to it. But just because the world has some harsh realities doesn't mean you have to step into the world not having some type of principle that's going to protect what you value. And that goes back to what we said earlier about sexual liberation, the freedom to actually know what sex is. So now that I know what it is, what I'm gonna do with it? Do I know what I need to do with it? Do I know who I want to do it with? And when I do make these choices to have sex with certain people, what am I basing these choices off of? Is it just that carnal, fleshly desire that, okay, I see something that I want and I'm gonna go get it? Or am I actually sitting down making conscious decisions about, having sex? I think that there's pressure on women having conscious decisions about having sex with certain people, and I think that there's not enough emphasis on having, thinking about who you're having sex with when you're a guy, or when you're a boy. Um, like I said, in a perfect world, we'd be sitting down with the girl and the boy and saying, "Hey, there's consequences to these kids." But the reality of it is that dad is taking the son over here in this corner, or whomever is taking the boy over here in this corner and saying one thing, and
Mhm.
and the girl is being told another. I think it really comes down to teaching girls and boys, young men and young women, you know, is sex something that you actually want to value? Is this a value to you? Because when you value something, you develop principles to protect that value. You
Mm-hmm.
develop some things to keep that as a value, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And when it turns into something else, now we're running into words like addiction. Now we're running into
Mm-hmm.
words like habits, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that's probably another show and another conversation. But some of us out here saying we value sex and that it's so important to us, but really it's something that you're doing that is like a habit, something that you're doing to cope,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of doing it a lot with a lot of
Yeah,
different
Because it's a
folks.
crutch.
but that's but,
Right.
but that's what I was gonna say too when we talk about the differences between the conversations that we're having with boys and girls. And I just want to say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
KA, shout out. She's in the comments.
Hey,
But
Kay.
but but I think we do boys a disservice, right? Because we don't properly prepare them for the consequences that come along with the sex that they're having. Like one of the things, who was it? T.I. before, and a lot of people say this. It wasn't just him, right? But he
Mm-hmm.
justified, wanting to monitor his daughter's virginity versus what he do with his sons, because his mind, he like, well, the child is gonna go to her mama house, right? The child ain't gonna be at
Mm-hmm.
my house. But in the same token, on the flip side, you aren't concerned at all about what that will do to your son who actually wants to be a father, right? If he fathers a child
Mm-hmm.
with the wrong woman, then he's going to be at an even greater disadvantage because the baby at her house. So now he at your house depressed, sick, can't eat, upset, want to go beat people up and fight and do all this stuff because he can't see his baby. Like that's a consequence. Like that is also a consequence that does not get discussed. Like, well, it's gonna be over there. Yeah, but he wants it over here. Like he wants to see his baby, right? And that's why I say we don't talk to boys about that. That's why like it's the whole victim mentality surrounding that type of stuff, right? Where they be like, "Cause they won't let me see my baby. I can't." And it's like they didn't even know the girl from a can of paint.
Yes. You didn't think
that.
about who you were laying down with because you're a man.
At all. And you will have conversations with them and they acting like you speaking French when you be like, but they're like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I mean, she just shouldn't be like this. Like, yeah, but you have a choice. What do you mean? When did I have a choice? I didn't.
Yeah. And you find your way. You have now attached yourself to somebody for 18 years at minimum. And not only that, you have brought somebody into the world that is yours, right? And who's going to be influenced by someone. And you don't think you should care who that someone is? That's problematic. So I agree.
Right.
I completely agree. We do
Right.
not teach men and young boys that they should be accountable and responsible for who they lay down with. And people always talk about like the baby aspect of it, but I'm always thinking about the STD aspect of it.
Exactly.
The gift that keeps on giving.
The baby, but guess what? You can carry an STD. So
exactly.
It's beyond me.
You know how many I call them so working in social work and working as a mental health clinician for the state and private. I have condoms, I have pamphlets, I have things lying around. Do you know how many young adults that I have to like sit down and say, look, I hear you talking about unwanted pregnancies and abortions and stuff. What I haven't heard you say is STDs and sexually transmitted diseases and HIV and women knowing their health, and these women coming to me who have not been to a gynecologist since um before the end, before Christ. They ain't been in a long time, and it's just like, why haven't we been? Some women who, and I kid you not, never had a pap smear and don't know what a pap smear is. In our community, I got a problem with that. Mr. Hill, I said STD. I have a son that says sometimes kids don't come out the way they should come out. Anywho, it's the sexual liberation is also the freedom to talk about body parts and what these body parts do, and sex ed, because some of us think that we teaching these kids sexual education, but we again, we have a difficulty talking about the things that are hard to talk about. With the boys, we going all out. We bringing the condoms into the room and stuff. We showing them how to put them on and all of that. With the girls,
we passing around sticks of gum.
That, look, like you said in that example, which is very disturbing to me. It's disturbing. I have to say, it's disturbing. But we're not having those talks about, let's go to the gynecologist. Let's get some questions answered. Okay. Let me tell you what a pap smear is and what's the purpose of a pap smear, young lady. Let me tell you what you can catch out here other than just a baby. Mm-hmm. We can teach them to do whatever they want, when they want, and how they want to do it. But we have to actually tell them that you may or may not be able to control these consequences based on these decisions that you're making. You may not be able to, you can't cry away, gonorrhea. You can't whine away, an STD after you've decided to have sex unprotected with someone. It's a gamble. It's a gamble. I just told somebody that on social media, and of course it was a male, and of course he was displeased with my answer. But my answer to that was, when you sign up to have sex, you signing up for really all of it. It's a gamble. Yeah. It's like rolling dice. It's like rolling dice. And I think that we need to have that conversation. And if they choose to roll the dice, okay, let me show you what might happen. Okay. And if you choose not to roll the dice, it doesn't make you what's the term that they used to use? A lame or a square.
Prudish.
You just chose not to roll. Yeah, there you go. You just chose not to roll the dice. Now if you are a person who is spiritual and you have spiritual beliefs, like I did when I was a teenager, my belief was, I'm not gonna give myself away to nobody except for my husband. Okay. That almost worked, but not quite. Okay. I'm not gonna give myself away. That's what I stood on, and it worked because I didn't have no child as a teenager. I didn't have a child as a young adult. But when I did start, it was a gamble. It was a gamble, and that's how my grandmother explained it to me. It was a gamble, right. In the comments, sex education is more than just knowing how to stick and move. It's so much. And then the other thing too, and then I'm gonna stop. The emotional part that we don't talk about with the boys, because contrary to what popular people want to say in society or whatever, there are some boys
that will be jumping out your bushes.
There you go. They get there you go, Cannon. They get connected. Mm-hmm. They get connected, and then we're not teaching them how to deal with their emotions surrounding a sexual relationship or relationships, period. All we get to hear is women are more emotional than men, and y'all need to learn how to control that. But nobody's talking to the boy about
that anger,
feeling about this person that I'm speaking with. Yeah, how do I, like, and they experience more than anger. They told they ignore the other stuff,
anxiety.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, yeah, they experience those things, but they're allowed to manifest it as anger by society. They don't look at anger as an emotion. So all their other emotions that they may experience, they channel it and and manifest it as anger. Like they could be anxious and it's gonna be anger. Like you said, they could be sad and it's gonna be anger. Like whatever it is, they're gonna manifest it as anger because that's an acceptable expression, but they don't look at that as an emotion.
So yeah, that we need to teach them the emotional responsibility that comes along with sleeping with somebody. I just believe that. I just believe that. I have an older nephew, and I remember asking him recently back in the spring, hey, you dating anybody? We want a family trip, and he was like, no, because he said, A, I can't afford it. He's a college student, and then B, he was like, I don't think I'm ready for all of that. I got respect for you. Because obviously he's been thinking about it. Obviously he's been in a situation where he's just, I know it's gonna take a lot and I'm not ready to go there. So I think we need to have the conversations that are hard to have sometimes. I think we need to switch rooms sometimes. Sometimes mom need to go in there with son and talk to son, and then dad need to go in there with daughter and talk to her. And then we all come on together and have a conference. Let's talk about what we heard from mom and dad, So
I like what you said about emotional responsibility, which you may not agree, Cannon, but I didn't necessarily mind what T.I. did. I mean, the reality is, I know. The reality is that baby is more than likely going to come home to there. And in the perfect world, like you said, yeah, we can both be playhouse. I don't know what the goal would be in that situation, but when you don't have these talks with girls before, then it builds resentment, and then that's when you get a lot of the parental alienation. And then with men, then they're confused because why are you treating me like this? Well, I'm the only one with the consequences, And so when you don't have these conversations ahead of time, you don't have the reality, because in the perfect world, yeah, we could both give y'all the consequences, but reality is that child is going to come home to T.I.'s home until they go out and do whatever they think they're going to do. If they go be a family, cool. If they don't, whatever. But I mean, we can play.
Well, I can tell you why I say
what happened.
I can tell you why I say what I say because of things that I've seen firsthand. Why I say that is we severely underestimate the consequences or how that affects men. And that's because my son, my oldest son that I have with my ex-husband or whatever, I have the experience of I had my son, I brought my son home. My son was my world. Like nobody could tell me anything about my baby. This is my baby. Like we're going to fight, right? My husband now, we've known each other since we were like 13 years old, right? So we've been friends for a very long time. I watched this man go through an experience with his first son, who he loved, like I love my son, right? But he couldn't take his son home. You see what I mean? But he loved his son like I love my son. I cannot imagine if somebody tells me I cannot take my son home.
Well, I'm not saying you can't take the child home.
No.
Initially,
no.
What's going to come home with T.I.'s family?
Because they had so many issues in the beginning. What I'm saying is I watched a man go through emotional grief and turmoil because they could not be with their child the way that they wanted to. And that is very severe. So what I'm saying is we can sit here and be like, well, it's not the same consequence because she take the baby home. Yeah, like she don't have to have somebody telling her she can't see her baby and she can't get the baby.
Well, what's the solution if they're not a married couple and they're not in the house together and she's obviously living with her dad and his family and he's doing whatever? I mean, what is the solution? If y'all don't have a home, I'm not saying that
no, I'm not saying that that's not the solution or not. What I'm saying is that we're underestimating the consequence that has for you. You said you agree because for T.I. not to be as hard on his son because the girl is going to take.
Oh no, not to be hard on his son, but to actually be, conscious of the fact that if she does bring a baby home, it's going to come here. Because the reality is,
he's not conscious of what his son is going to be going through. If his son had a baby out there somewhere that he can't have access to, you do see what I'm saying? We underestimate
what you're saying. Yeah. It's not like you're assuming it's going to be bad, but what I'm saying is, if the son wants to be a father, that's something you sit down and talk about. If y'all want to be a family, go get a home, go get an apartment, whatever, go be a family. But if y'all not, then we got to pick a stable place for the baby to stay stable, not bouncing back and forth, whatever y'all trying to do with y'all instability,
And no, but that's what I'm saying. That's why it's important to talk to boys about that as a reality.
Mhm.
Is what
No,
I'm
that's
saying
true.
is when they never even think of that as a
That's fair.
reality.
Okay, I see
When
what
we
you're saying.
come from the assumption that men or boys don't want to be fathers, right? Or are not going to want to be fathers, or are not going to want you to, it's like we already have this idea, right? When we say, well, you know, the baby going to be over there. It's like we already coming from the assumption that he's not going to care as much, right? And he going to be
No, I
making
think it's just
like,
because the mom's more than likely, or not more than likely, sorry, but most of the time the mom's going to breastfeed. So
right,
it
no,
wouldn't make sense to send the baby
what I'm saying
home
is
with
a
that.
man needs to be aware of that. That if he
No,
has a
yeah,
child,
absolutely.
that he's not prepared. You see what I'm saying? He's
Mhm.
not prepared for the fact, right? That if he has a child with somebody he's not with, or who he's not in a home with, he is not mentally prepared or doesn't even understand the emotional consequences that will have. Is what I'm saying. Because the she over there breastfeeding the baby somewhere, you ain't seen your baby for 5 days. And
Right,
what
no, that's
saying
not
is
okay. I'm saying, you know, you can
right.
go visit.
And what I'm
He'll
saying
come
is
over, y'all can have a
you
sleepover.
have
I
to
don't
prepare
know.
them for the consequence. We tell them, oh, that baby gonna be over there. But we don't tell them how that's gonna make them feel when that baby over there. Do you see what I'm saying? That's why they
No,
so
I agree,
willy-nilly about the stuff that they do, and then they confused after the fact when they're in the situation and they didn't have any expectation to have these experiences. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's important to not just be like, oh well, if my daughter have a baby, she gonna bring the baby here. Well, it's just as paramount. If your son have a baby, he's gonna be just as in a maybe even a worse situation.
You should be over there.
Now y'all have no control over what's going on with that baby, right? So it's possibly could be even worse. You know what I mean? So now you got to go to court and you got to do all this stuff. So yeah, it's just as important, and that's all I was saying.
I think too, we got to look at Ti. We talking about somebody who got a bunch of kids.
Yeah, he's
I think Ti got like 3-4. He got 3-4 different baby mamas.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think that he did what he did because I think here comes the trauma. Here comes the trauma. He remembered what it was like as a young man making these children. And I got one over here and I got one over here. And I want to marry her, so I got some over here too, but I want her to get along with the rest of them. Well, I got all this stuff going on. And I think sometimes we make these decisions and choices thinking that we got our children's best interests in mind, when really in the back of our head, we like, I don't want them to be messed up like I was messed up. Or I don't want them to do what I had to deal with or do. I think that's what it was. I think I think that he thought about, and I'm not saying, I don't know how he treated his baby mothers. I don't know his conversation or communication with them. All we know is what we saw on TV. That he has this open communication. Obviously he do, because all the children at some point come and live with him all together. So, you know, I think that he did what he did because there you go, projection. That's the word I was looking for. I think he was kind of like, you know, I know what I went through making all these kids and having them here, there, and everywhere. I don't want my daughter to be one of those girls.
But then you should want your son to be like you. You know what I mean?
Hey, I didn't say it was right. I'm just telling you what
just the reality.
I think he is projecting on some level. I think a lot of dads, especially black dads, do that. I think a lot of black dads who have multiple children with multiple different women look at these daughters different because they know, here it comes, they know how they treated somebody else's daughter.
Right,
so
but it's even crazy, and it's even more of a cognitive dissonance because the daughter that you're talking about, he's not with that. That's one of the women that he did whatever, and he's not with. So
it was his best friend.
Showing her,
it was his best friend at the time. He had a daughter with his best friend.
So you are actually you're not giving her that framework or that foundation, or you're not actually showing her, right? You actually have her mother, who she's gonna be spending time with her mother. She's gonna be, looking at what her mother does, not what her mother says, not what you say, what you do, not considering none of that. But you just think you could just go out here all willing, then just get your daughter and be like, no, you're not gonna do it. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. Because you're not even in the house with her.
I
agree with what you're saying. In a way so that you can consistently be. You didn't even plan for that, right? To be like, okay, I want to have all my kids with the same person to be in one house so I can be present, right? You didn't even think about none of that, but now you want to after the fact be like, that's not how kids work. Sorry, it's just not. That's not how
it's not. But that's how trauma and projection works, though. That's how it works.
Yeah.
I think that, if he was here with us today, I would tell him to process and work that out. Process
Mhm.
that with yourself. Understand that your children are not you. Understand that on some level you may want your sons to be like you, but have this same conversation and concern with them that you're having with the daughter. Understand that they're not the situation that you found yourself in. Because if I'm not mistaken, he was young when he started having children. I think his oldest son, what is now what, in his 20s, I think. His oldest son is in his 20s. Um, I think that he looked back on what he did and was like, well, I don't want her to go through what I might have put somebody else's daughter through. So I'm gonna put a chokehold I'm going to the doctor. I'm going to find out if she's been doing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do this and that.
Instead of being a better example for her.
Right. But again, that trauma, when that trauma activates, because we normalize our trauma. We normalize our trauma. And when it activates, we ain't looking at rhyme and reason. We looking at let me find out. Let me do some investigating. Let me do this and that instead of just having a conversation with her. You know. And obviously, because I think some of it played out on that reality show they were on. And obviously there's some communication issues with him and her even beyond this topic. I think he showed us a good example of what it looks like when, like I said, sometimes mom needs to go in the room and talk to the son, and dad needs to go and develop the communication with the daughter. This is a classic example where he could have done that and he didn't. He asserted authority instead of having a discussion. And the worst thing you can do with a adolescent or a teenager, or a young person that you're parenting, is assert your authority and let them know, oh, I'm the boss, so I'm going to do this and that. You have literally just shut down communication. You have. You're not looking at them as someone that, okay, we can talk about this. Let's discuss. Tell me what you've been up to. Tell me who you've been dating. Do you want to share that with me? No, no, no. What do we do? What do we do? My black mama ward finna come on. Now we doing investigating. Okay. Now we sniffing around in the room. Now we looking at stuff.
I
Looking
think
at
you touching on our last topic now. You got to
yeah,
pause.
yeah.
We gotta wrap this one up. We gotta wrap this one up, okay? Ashley, I was gonna say I agree with you ladies. I do think that as a parent, I'm a teacher, y'all, so I deal with a lot of kids. You do have to assert authority, but you have to do it in a loving way. You have to do it in a way that respects them as people.
There you go.
And
Yes.
you have to be open and receptive to listening and hearing and having conversations as well, and equipping them to make decisions and allowing them the space to make those decisions. But when you just go from the authoritative standpoint and you're trying to, I won't even say that was authoritative, because that's not being a leader. That was more so trying to control, and doing that absent guidance is not effective. And that's why we saw her, pretty much publicly denounce what he said or what he was doing, and really said some things that I think she should have kept private, but she rejected pretty much everything that he was really trying to do. He meant well, but the way he went about it was not effective, unfortunately, because it was very intrusive, very disrespectful, and a little bit demeaning. I could not imagine anybody thinking that they should come to my like a pap smear appointment with me.
Right.
It's so strange.
And then tell the world about it.
I know.
Yeah. Right.
That's not weird at all.
So
right. But think about his family dynamic real quick, and then we're gonna continue. You got a young man who grew up in a house with an older sister, a single mama, some old school granddads and uncles, that he's protective of. He got the streets, Bankhead, okay, West Side. They talking, players, pimps, and everything. This is how you conduct yourself around women. Then you got this older sister and mama that you treasure so much, and then you out here in the street. It goes back to what we were saying earlier. All these different conversations he might have had about sex and women, and then it's like a dice. It's like a gamble. Let me go with this and see if that works. I think that's what he did. And hopefully he'll grow and evolve from this decision and learn something better to do as a father of young Black women. Hopefully we're gonna find out and see. So.
All right, ladies. All right. So we're going to move on to our next topic, and we actually have a very special guest who is named Mike Link. And I saw him, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I saw him on Facebook, and he has some very interesting things to say and a lot of things going on. I'm going to let him introduce himself more, but let's give him a round of applause, ladies.
Hey, Mike.
How y'all doing?
How are you?
Can y'all hear my audio okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, good. So I'm introducing myself.
Yeah, you can, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know that you are a motivational speaker. Is that correct?
I like to use the word inspiration.
Inspirational speaker, and you do so many other things. I saw a little bit. Can
Okay,
you tell us a little bit about yourself?
to give you guys a little bit about me, I'm in the state of Virginia. In general, my background is in media. I briefly worked in television, like in the news sector for a little while. And then I eventually branched off and started my own business with me and a few of my partners. Outside of that, just in general, what I'm passionate about has a lot to do with how I grew up, relationships, and I mentor kids. I go speak in schools. I just wrote a book that I released this year. It's basically about, a child or me growing up without my father, and how that impacted my life. But as well, sort of putting a microscope on how my mom operated in co-parenting with my dad when them two got divorced. There's a lot more that I do, but I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you for joining us tonight. So Mike is going to give us a male's perspective. And I hate to say male's perspective because even amongst men, there are variations of opinions, just like there are with us, right? So I really hate when people say male's opinion and woman's opinion. I really want his opinion, but I wanted to make sure that, there is someone who represented the other sex in this conversation. And the conversation has to do with submission. The question is, do Black men understand submission?
Woo-wee.
That is the question. And Mike, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. But first I wanted to ask why. I think in the group that we're in, I think maybe one of my comments, I think they might have been talking about submission in the group. And was it my comment that made you, I guess, reach out to me? I'm just trying to understand from.
Yes, I don't even remember the comment, but I remember thinking, he sounds like a man who is who wants to be a leader in a relationship with a woman or a marriage and understands a woman's role to submit, but also may understand the man's role. I don't sense that most of the men in this group that will remain nameless understand that or acknowledge that men have a certain role when you talk about submission. And like I said, I should have done more due diligence, but something told me he'd be a good person to have on the show. I kind of scanned you a little bit, but there was a particular comment that was what made me think, let's have him on the show and just see what he has to say. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll kind of deep dive into it. Basically what she was talking about, my comment was basically that I feel like a lot of us as men don't understand that there is a form of submission that we as men also have to operate when it comes to relationships. I think if you're a churchgoer, If you're, I wouldn't say like a Bible thumper or anything like that. In churches, it's when you hear submission, it's often in reference to a woman. But there is a component when submission is talked about that it's also related to how a man should operate. It's just the word submission is not necessarily attached to men. But I go to church, grew up in church, and I can see it from both sides, in the secular world as well as biblical. And I'll try to explain it from both aspects. One, I think submission will reach some form of conflict if both man and woman don't understand what it looks like. We might know the definition. And I also think when it comes to the word submission, sometimes for people who don't understand it or know what it looks like or how it's operated, submission sounds like it's like a word that's like a bad thing. And depending on how it's communicated, it can sound like a turnoff. Especially when you hear people who talk about it, but they don't really understand it. And y'all can determine if I sound like I know what I'm talking about or not based on how I continue to go on with this. I believe submission from a standpoint of what men would desire from a woman happens organically. It's almost like there's this energy. There's and the best way I can say that is from a church standpoint, when a male is, when he's being obedient, when he's obeying, when he's put on and when he's subject to the word of God per se, God will equip us in a manner where the way we operate, and a woman who understands what submission is, when she sees us operate in obedience, when she sees that a man puts himself under God, when she sees that a man will subject himself to being chastised by God and acknowledge it to better himself, she understands and sees that he operates in that way. I believe that submission will come automatically if she understands it from that perspective. Now, let's just say you're not a churchgoer, you're not into God like that, you're not religious. When you think about the meaning of it, to obey, to put under, to subject to, when you think about, I would say when you think about the word obey, what principles as a man in general, if you strip religion away, what principles are you obeying, and are those good principles? Put under, what structure are you under as a man, or under a system that you sort of like live by? And is that structure or that system that you're under, does that produce good energy? Does it produce good fruit? When you think about just being subject to, are you a man who's open to constructive criticism? Are you willing to grow when you're called out on something that you're not doing correctly? That's when you talk about submission. When a man is supposed to submit, God, in my opinion and from my understanding, he will point that out to you as a man. And if your ears and heart and mind is open to the word in that context of that definition, then a man will say, okay, all right, you're right, let me correct myself. And if you're not religious, the same thing. It's like if a friend comes to you and points out something and you're receptive to it, you're open to it. And the same thing should happen, I believe, in a relationship, in a healthy relationship. When your woman points out things about you, when she, sort of gives you some type of some guidance, you should be willing and open to take it in consideration. And I think as well, when it comes to the word submit, there's a form of leadership that is attached to that, in my opinion. And I think a woman can identify that as long as she recognizes and understands it from that particular perspective. But if two people don't really understand and know how that like operates, you're always going to have some form of conflict, in my opinion, in a relationship, and why the submission won't come from either end, because it's something that you got to get a better understanding about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think all of us probably do. Just after being exposed to contrary opinions where the submission is always just about what the woman should do. I think, unfortunately, in our community, there are lots of women who don't understand submission and lots of women who don't submit when they should be submitting, in their marriages, unfortunately. But I think that there are women who have the heart of submission and who want to submit. And it's important for us also to have men who understand their roles in submission.
Can I touch on something too?
Yeah.
I would say for me, my parents were together from my birth, and then what I mean together, they were married. They were married from my birth to I was about 12 years old. Around 10, 11, my dad, started operating and getting involved in stuff in the streets and things, and drugs and stuff. And eventually they got divorced. So for me, my observation of my father, a lot of my memories are negative because of when I was younger. I ain't necessarily retained a lot of things as far as the good part of when my mom and dad had a good relationship. I have an older sister, and she probably has more insight on seeing the healthier part of my dad. So I didn't really have an example of two people knowing what submitting was. So for me, I had to learn it on my own. I had to go out and look for examples. Like you guys were, talking about T.I. as an example and things like that. And I think a lot of times in this world in general, society, people in relationships look at the wrong individuals to, I guess, get information. And then they end up operating in their relationship incorrectly because of celebrities, these public figures, and they end up not operating right because they take in their information, and some subconsciously don't even realize that they're operating off of something that they might have seen T.I. and Tiny do in their marriage and don't even realize it just because they heard it or absorbed something. And I learned not to do that at an early age. I try to look for men and whole families, and I even ask questions. I read. I try to study books because I'm not married. I'm in a relationship, but I've always said to myself, at the point of when I do get married, how do I prepare myself? Because I know there were some things that I didn't get from my father, as well as there are some things that I saw that were negative between my mother and my father and the way that they operated that had nothing to do with submitting, you know what I'm saying, as it relates to that particular subject. So that's the reason, Ashley, why I made the comment that I made in the group about the question surrounding submitting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I did appreciate myself about just the fact that, I think you talked a little bit about, I think you mentioned, you didn't use the word self-control, but just you mentioned a few different qualities that leaders have, and when you see certain things in a leader, you see that they have foresight, you see that they're wise, you see that they're fair, you see that they're disciplined, you see that they live by a certain morale. You will follow them easily, because you can trust them, right? So I know that a lot of women who desire a leader and a man that they can follow will appreciate that. I think some people or some men, from what I'm hearing, just expect the woman to submit because that's what you're supposed to do. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. But how is that going to happen unless we have somebody who's going to follow, who's going to lead us? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
So,
think sometimes too, sorry to cut you off. We as men, I think when we hear the word submit, to some degree, it's like when we get married, when I say something, you're supposed to like automatically do it. And it doesn't work like that. But I think some men might define it like that because they don't understand the concept of what marriage is really all about. And that's what leads us down the wrong path.
okay. Thank you. So, ladies, what do you all think? What are your thoughts about this topic?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this, especially in this context. So one thing I'm going to say, I'm agnostic, so I am not religious in any way, shape, or form. A lot of us aren't out here. I will first say that I do believe that the very concept of submission, the way that we talk about it in this community, the Black community, and then in the even smaller community, like in the group which we will not name, the way that we discuss it, I think, is based in religious doctrine, right? It comes from that basis, even though I feel like a lot of people who discuss it are not religious themselves either, or don't follow a lot of the other doctrine. That is just this idea, right? That kind of comes from this religious example or this religious thought, right? Train of thought to be like a woman must, because they always quote the Bible. They quote the Bible first thing they're going to quote when they're talking about it. So, the question was, do I think that they understand submission? I'm going to say, they understand submission in the context of which they discuss it, which I think that they view it and see it as a way to gain power for themselves over someone else. That's the way that they talk about it. When they mention what that means to them, they're going to bring up, if I, like, the first thing they're going to say is, if I tell you this, then you just need to do it, right? Or I'm in charge. Everything that they bring up when they're having that conversation about submission is around them dominating or controlling somebody else. Like that's what it is, right? You never bring up same-sex couples in this whole conversation when we talk about gender roles and we talk about this person got to submit to that person and all those other things. Like, that's something that exists too, which is going to be a different dynamic. And it's just not a conversation that I see across wider communities. Like, I never see people running around like, I need people to submit to me. Like, I just don't see people doing it. And I do think that it comes from a place of maybe subconsciously they have a sense of powerlessness, right? So it comes from a place of wanting to be able to exert power somewhere, even if it's just in the house. You know what I mean? Even if it's just in this small little piece or portion of where I am, at least I can have power over this thing because I don't have power anywhere else. And I think that that's what it boils down to and where it comes from, because I just really, a lot of times, I don't even see the value in these conversations. Like, what, at the end of the day, what are we really discussing? Like, my husband can tell you, and I say all the time, like, we understand that there are, if you want to talk about submission in terms of one person basically acquiescing to someone else, right, on certain things or whatever, then I mean, you're gonna be doing that. Both of you gonna be doing that throughout the whole relationship, or you should be. So what are we really talking about when we like, because I need you to just submit? what is that anyway, right? And my whole thing is, if you are a competent person, if you are an inspirational person, right? People follow. And if you want to talk about in terms of being a leader and being followed, whatever, people don't I mean, people do choose who they want to follow, but they choose it based on inspiration, right? They follow people that they see admirable traits in, that they see qualities that they may want for themselves or things like that. People don't just follow you because you have a certain set of genitalia. Like, it just doesn't happen. But that's the way that the conversation happens. And I just don't think it's productive. It's like, oh, because I'm a man, right? I don't have to do no work. I don't have to be any kind of specific person. I don't have to do anything. Just by the very virtue of me being a man, then you have to be lower than me. And that's that you have to I don't want to use the word submit again, but you have to basically defer to me for everything, right? I get the final say for everything. Like, every time I've had this conversation, like actually having a back and forth conversation with the men who talk about submission in that way, it always goes back to the same thing. They'll have the conversation with me and my husband when my husband says, he say, you know, me and my husband are partners. Like, this is a partnership. Like, we don't have that type of situation where it's like, oh, she has to submit because she's the woman and I'm the man. And they always say, well, I mean, who makes the decisions? He said, well, the things that she's strong in, I defer to her, and she makes the decisions, and the things that I'm strong in, she defers to me, and I make the decision. And they're like, well, what about if y'all can't agree on something, then don't you get the final say? And it's like, well, that's what communication comes in at. Like, who can't communicate to come to an understanding? That's where trust and all those things come into play, right? I just don't really see too many situations where it's just like, we had a stalemate. Okay, whoever got the penis gets to decide. It makes no sense to me. Like, it's like, I don't understand how in application that makes any sense, or I just don't find the value outside of a religious context. Now, people who are, you know, who follow that doctrine, right, and who are part of that, it makes total sense to me if you're gonna follow the whole thing, right, and you're gonna really commit to that or whatever. But to take out little pieces as secular people and take out one little passage and then bend it to make it mean what you want it to mean just so you can lord over somebody, it's ridiculous. But that's
I agree.
Okay. So, well, yeah, I definitely think that, you know, I value the idea of submission in a relationship. I come from more of a Christian standpoint with that, but I also understand that not everybody comes from that background. You know, usually submission is rooted in some form of faith, right? Usually it's like, you know, whether it's Christianity or Islam, you know, it's usually rooted in that. So apart from that, I'm not quite sure how that works. It does just kind of sound like, oh, well, because I'm the man, then, you know, I'm supposed to do it. But then it's like, okay, well, how does that naturally work? But in the context of like a Christian or maybe you know, I'm not Muslim, but you know, if I were in a marriage with somebody who shares those similar beliefs, then there is a place for submission, right? I think the problem is people who are worldly try to attach some of those godly or those biblical principles to their worldly relationship, but you're worldly in every other regard. It just doesn't seem to add up. So I think it's so important to find like-minded people. You know, if you are a Christian woman or a Christian man, you're gonna need to look for a Christian spouse, right? And then those worldly people kind of got to figure out, like, what are y'all doing? You know, do you want parts of this Christianity and the way God has ordained it, or do you not? You know, and if you do, then there are certain aspects or roles that you fulfill as a wife and roles that you fulfill as a husband, right? You know, but that's the thing that's missing from the conversation a lot of times, it seems like. But anyway, I don't want to talk too much. So I want to hear from you guys again. Jovanda and Raven. Oh, and I want to shout out La Peef Network. The La Peef Network has
Oh,
joined us. Hey, hey,
thanks.
Hello,
hey,
hello.
we're at the La Peef Network. JR, Anton, okay, Courtney, Rilla. Who am I missing? Amira. All right, what are you guys thinking?
I think men do understand submission. I think they know exactly what they want. I think the problem comes in when they don't know how to cultivate that kind of environment to get that dynamic out of a woman. Because a lot of people talk about income. It's not just income. Of course, you got to have money to pay bills and stuff like that, but it's also who you're having around the house. Can I trust you to be that protector? I can't submit to you if you got Mike and Bob and Job and whoever coming over all times of the night around the kids, and you drunk bringing back God knows what, doing God knows who. It's too much. So I do believe women should submit to their husbands. This is kind of like a gender role thing for me. I think in the world, it's not a lot of women leading countries. So if we're going to give Black men the space to make mistakes and learn how to be leaders, it's going to have to happen in the home, not just at their job. You're going to have to be practicing that leadership at home. You're going to practice submitting at home. So
Okay.
Mm.
All right, what do you think?
Oh, I love what she said about cultivate. Oh my goodness, because yeah, gardening is a hobby of mine. So I love, yeah, I hear words like that, I get excited. But we do have to cultivate things in our lives that we want to see. One of my favorite phrases is, "We have to be the change we want to see." When I got married at the age of 23, I didn't know how to be anybody's wife. I didn't know how to do it. I was raised in the church. I was raised in the church to the point where, like, what is today is Wednesday night. I would not be online. I would not be watching television. We would be in the Bible or we would be doing homework. And Proverbs 31 was taught to me as a young woman on so many different levels. I've been to so many conferences and so many Bible studies and so many things on Proverbs 31. So it's literally one of my values. You know, at my house, and I can tell y'all how it works. This wife does submit to her husband. I do believe that wives should submit to their husbands. I do believe in that. However, I think that there are a lot of things that both wives and husbands should be doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we know how to do it. And I think that it just comes down to a matter of learning how to be the change we want to see and learning how to cultivate things like submission, cultivating what is it like to be a wife, cultivating what should I be doing as a husband. You have to learn these things. And I think that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show, communicating what you know and what you don't know in terms of marriage and relationships. Like I said, I went into my marriage. I'm a child when I got married. I looked like a little kid, 22, 23 years old. Knew I wanted to be married, knew I wanted to have kids, knew I wanted to have a family. That's what I knew. The other stuff I learned as I went along on my own and with my husband. We learned together. Um,
Mm,
I learned that there's somebody else in this relationship other than me, because I think there is sometimes we're in a natural space where we are a little bit self-centered at times, and I had to learn that it's not all about me. I had to learn that even though he may not know how to submit, or let me reverse that. Even though I may not know how to submit, and maybe he doesn't know certain things in terms of what he needs to be doing as a husband, I have to put the focus on what I have control over. I cannot control another person. I cannot control my husband. I can't control how he grows in his marriage. I have control over me. I have control over what I learned as a young woman, going back to Proverbs 31. And I remember the day my aunt opened it up. I think I was like year 2 or 3 of marriage. And I'm sitting here complaining about nobody told me about it. It wasn't going to be this, this, and this. And I didn't know about blah, 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 blah. And she just nicely opened her Bible up and she said, "Tell me what you learned, though. And tell me what you're implementing. And tell me what you were taught." And it was in that moment that I found out that, I'm so busy complaining about him not being the man that I want to see that I'm not even trying to figure out or look at. This is what I learned as a value. My value was Proverbs 31. Okay, my value, I value my spiritual self. So the principle means I'm supposed to be honoring that, you know, and that's my own spiritual practice and my own belief as a Christian. So, I think that it comes down to roles. I think it comes down to you realizing what you have control over and what you don't have control over, which means the reality of it is in some marriages, the wives, I think sometimes we get frustrated, but we have to know that that husband is going to have that growth spurt at some point. That should not stop me from submitting. Okay. Now I know people like to use that analogy of, well, if he was leading you off a cliff, would you walk behind him and y'all fall off the cliff together? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about patience. I'm talking about understanding what a relationship is. I'm talking about me knowing who I need to be as a wife, and as long as I'm doing my part, then things will fall into place. That's the part that I focus on. So for me, I do think that I kind of agree with Raven. I think that black men, and I think men in general, I think they have what it takes to be a leader in a marriage. I think that they want. I think men who do get married, they desire to be that husband. Do they always understand what comes with that? No. Do they always understand that, okay, I've planted this seed of submission. I need to go out there and water it. I need to go out there and weed around it. I need to put my little miracle grow and my other little stuff and my neem oil and stuff. Do they always understand that that's what they need to do? No, I don't think they do. You know, and I think they do what sometimes women do. We get frustrated. We don't see the man in front of us that we want, and then it's like, oh, he don't know how. Maybe he don't know how yet. How about that? Maybe he's growing and learning that. That's how I feel about it.
Hi, Darren. 1 second, okay? Oh, sorry, I was supposed to be on mute. We are going to start taking callers, but I wanted to ask you, Mike, what do you think, or what would you say to men and women, specifically in our communities, because I think we're the ones struggling with this right now, that will help us understand submission a little better? Because right now, the men are like, women ain't submitting, black women ain't submitting, you know, they think it's conditional. They think that, they don't have to, they're not in order. But the black women are like, some of them are like, I ain't got to submit. But then there are some who are like, well, what am I submitting to? And I need you to be more of a leader. And I need to feel trust. I need to know that you are going to lead me the right place. So what would you say? What would you say?
I think there's two parts to it. I think we all have to admit and acknowledge that we have examples to show us what that looks like. And if we didn't, how do we go about it together, research it, and then operate in those things and that information that we get? And then when we don't get it right, try not to get bent up or triggered about it, but learn to work together. And like Cannon said, earlier, that communication is a big deal. And what you communicate, what you don't know, what you think you might know, I think we should double down on really looking for that information and going to people who actually know what it looks like, how it's operated, so you can have some information to go off of. Because if we just keep going on about like what we seeing in the world, all we gonna keep doing is spinning in circles. And granted, I go to church and things like that, but what Cannon said, when you strip religion out the way and when you communicate and understanding what a leader looks like, I mean, you got so many people out here jumping into relationships. And we talking about does he know how to lead or does she know how to submit? Like either parties, there's a lot of men don't necessarily understand what it looks like to be a leader, simply because we grew up without our dad, and then we're not getting around men who are legit leaders. as well as I think on the side of the woman, we don't have examples, and we really got to acknowledge that the world is steadily growing and expanding, and the more that we operate apart, we're not going to get to like where we want to if we desire this submission, if we desire these, these leaders. And I just think from a guy standpoint, like we do got to step up, and be a healthy leader, a proper leader. And as I said before, I just feel like when you learn how to operate like that and seek out that information and get that guidance, the submit part, I think it will come automatically. And we just got to be open and say, okay, I don't know, because that's what I did. I'm like, do I know everything about being a leader? No, I don't. So what is Mike gonna do? I'm going to look for it. I'm going to look for men that are healthy men that are operating, and I'm a study them. I'm gonna figure it out. So that's what I would say. You gotta find it. So if you don't have it.
Thank you. All right, so we do have a caller on the phone. All right, our caller, do you hear us? Are you in?
Yeah.
Do you all hear? This is Darwin. Do you all hear?
Hello.
Can you all hear him?
Yes.
Hey, Darwin, how are you?
Hey, Darwin.
How y'all doing today? How y'all doing tonight?
Hey.
Can you all hear him?
Yeah, I can hear him.
Oh, okay. He asked how y'all were doing. They're all right.
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Enjoying the show, that's all.
Thank you for joining us.
Good.
You wanted to share some thoughts?
Yeah, so first I answer the question about do men believe in submission and understand submission. I think we do understand submission. It just depends on who we willing to submit to and who we willing to respect to give that submission to, right? And I think that comes along with society putting boxes on everybody. Even if you're religion or not religious, you've been put in a box, right? And I think people try to follow that box, whether it's what men should do or how women should do, what women should do or how they should act when they're married or in a relationship. But I think if everybody just get out that box when they meet that person and allow themselves to grow with that person together, instead of staying in that box because you want to allow yourself to fully learn that person, right? Because if you have these expectations on this person already, and then if they don't meet those expectations, then you're just going to probably give up, right? So if you just take yourself out that box and allow yourself to grow with that person together, then y'all can have an organic relationship and make your own rules and set your own standards, right? That you can live with, live with and be happy with, right? Because they're your rules, they're your standards, right? And they're not society standards, they're not nobody else's standards, they're yours, right?
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Thank you. No, it does. Thank you for sharing. The only pushback I would have, though, is about this idea of making your own standards. Now, obviously, we decide how we live our lives, right? And we have to be in control of them. We can't control everything, though, right? We're not God. We can't control everything. And I know not everybody believes in God, but no matter what you believe in, you won't be able to control everything. But you were talking about kind of living by your own standards. But what does that mean, though? Because what if everybody just had their own way of living? Everybody has their own way of living and doing things. Doesn't that cause for confusion? So, if you just think anything goes?
Well, that's between you and your partner, right? You sit down and you talk about the things you like, the things you don't like, the things you want to do, the things you have aspiration to do, and if you both respect each other, you're going to allow each other to not only be their self, but to become one with you, right? And you're going to accept things, and I've always believed that if you hang around a person enough, you're going to start adapting their habits, right? So I've learned a lot from my wife. I took on a lot of her habits. She's made me a better person, and now we're going together. I'm not going in the opposite direction from her. We're doing things together that we both agreed on and that we both enjoy doing. You know, it takes a lot of compromise and a lot of sacrifice as well. It's not easy doing it. It's definitely hard work. But if you love that person and you're dedicated to not only that person but to your happiness and your true happiness, you're either going to be with that person or you're going to step away, right? Like no one is forcing you to be in this relationship with somebody that you can't find common ground with, right? So if you can submit to that person, it's really not a wrong or right. Like I don't like saying you're wrong or you're right, but if you can't submit to that person can't submit to you. It's not that they're wrong or you're wrong. Maybe it's not what it's meant to be, right? So it's all about communication and putting the work in.
Okay, I got you. All right. Well, thank you, Darren. Thank you for calling. Thank you for checking the show out.
Great show, ladies.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. There are a couple other callers. I'm going to try to get them back in. So if you were calling, you can go ahead and give a call back. We'll take a few more calls, and then we have to actually move on to our last topic, or maybe we'll save it for another day. All right. So there were a couple people calling in. Tiffany called in. So she's going to have to, let me see. All right. Well, maybe they'll call back. Oh, here. All right, Tiffany. This Tiffany?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. You guys hear her?
Hey, girl. Hey, Tiffany.
Yes, you all know me as Nakia.
Yes, we know you as Nakia. How are you?
Hi. I just wanted to tell you all I love the whole vibe of the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for joining. You're like the first person on, I think.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. And you still with us 2 hours later.
Yeah, I was gonna watch the whole thing because I love Ashley, Cannon, Miss Joe, and Raven. So I have to support.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know.
Thank you.
Spread the word. Hit the share button.
I will.
Okay.
And that's all I wanted to do was send my love. So you all have a good night, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Thank
you.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and move on. I think we have another caller. One moment. Hold on. Calling.
Hey, this is Cameron. I've been the one that was commenting a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for calling, everybody. We have Cameron on the line. He's been joining us. He's been in the chat. Everybody.
Hi, Cameron.
Hey, y'all. So, yeah, I definitely wanted to jump right on into this conversation because this was good. The first thing I wanted to say was the standards that you're talking about. We already have our own standards. Even people that's in religion and people that are a part of these groups, quote unquote, it's like it's their own like reasons for why they're doing it. People are driven by either like even if it was like fear, because a lot of us, I was raised Christian, but I don't identify under a religion anymore. But even back then, like I remember, like fear was a big tactic, and it like caused like people do all types of stuff when they're scared. So from that aspect, it's like we kind of already are on our own standards because there's no real sense of like together or control about any of it. If you really think about it, like diving deep into it, like that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. And like how, oh, well, this is what's supposed to happen. This is what's supposed. We're not robots. We're not machines. Like I just don't think it works like that. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. Do you guys have any questions for Cameron?
I don't really have any questions, but I just wanted to add, I totally agree. Like there's also like some comments in the comment section talking about leadership and just talking about how, you know, a leader provides guidance and vision and people choose to follow or not, but it's still a partnership, right? And I think that that's one of the most important pieces that's lost in this whole conversation is the fact, I feel like the fact that the conversation even goes the way that it does, it's almost like trying to beat somebody into submission, right? It's like this concept of submission or whatever you have in your mind, if you consider yourself to be a leader, whatever you feel that you are supposed to receive as a reward for being a leader, that is going to tell you whether or not you're actually the leader that you think you are, right? If you aren't getting the results that you in your mind think you're supposed to be getting, then it's time to look in the mirror. Like, I don't understand. I still have to go back to, I don't understand why you have to tell somebody that they need to submit to you. I don't understand why that needs to be a conversation. Because it doesn't make any sense. Like, you don't have to tell somebody that you're a leader and that they need to follow you, or tell somebody that they need to submit to you. You're already lost if you are doing that, right? If you can't look in the mirror and you and the fruits of your labor are not apparent, right? If you don't have the reality that you feel like you're supposed to have, then you are the one that's not operating the way that you think that you're supposed to operate. That is not even a conversation. You're not supposed to be telling other people that they need to submit to you and that they supposed to do XYZ. As a leader, you're just supposed to be exemplifying what a leader is, and then all the other stuff follows. That's what happens at the end of the day. That's just the point. But if you find yourself, I'm a leader and you won't follow me and you need to follow, like, you having that conversation just tells everybody that no, you're not. Like, we looking at it. Like, leaders don't need to have that conversation. No leader anywhere needs to run around beating their chest and screaming from the hilltops that they a leader and then get mad because people won't follow them. Then you're not a leader. Sorry. It's just the way. That's what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I touch on that too?
Yes, please do.
I think that's a good point. I think the hard part for a lot of us is just really doing self-evaluation and accepting like where we are, and understanding that if we need to grow, then do what you got to do to like grow. So I totally agree on that. And sometimes you walk around thinking you're something that you're not, and you really don't. A lot of people don't know. But if you can do that self-evaluation and get better, please, by all means, do it.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Cameron,
I have to agree. Yeah. Oh. No. I'm agreeing with both what Mike and Candace said. I've said it so many times about, you don't have to walk around with a label. Like, you're not if you're married, those of us who are married on the panel, you don't walk around every day saying I'm married and I'm somebody's wife. I'm married and I'm somebody's wife. I mean, what you do and how you conduct yourself shows that you're somebody's wife. I think it's the same thing with this whole women should submit to men. I think that it's a situation where it doesn't have to be exuded, like in terms verbally. You don't have to just walk around saying, "Oh, I'm a leader. I'm a leader," just like you guys are saying. I think in this instance, your walk should do more than just with your talk and your label. That's what I'm saying.
I think that's why it's so important for you to have people. Oh.
Raven, 1 second. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Let me let Cameron say something and then we'll end with you, okay? You get the last word.
Absolutely agree with that comment that was just said about how leadership works. And honestly, I just think the big key word in leadership is like influence. And it's like you, out of whatever you're doing and how you do it, people just want to do it like you because they see that it's effective, they see it's working. And I think that that's a lot of where leadership comes from and whatever that looks like, whether it is the quote unquote dominant role or the submissive role, just period. It's like, honestly, the submissive role is the more powerful one because that can get a lot more done. It works like female energy. Female energy is not just straight and hard in one way. So,
Okay.
but I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you, Cameron.
No
Thank you for calling in. Share the show with some friends and come back next week, okay?
Thank you. Y'all have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
You too.
All right.
Thanks, Cameron.
All right, Raven, you want to take us out with that conversation?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to hit on the importance of getting the man you marry vetted by wise counsel. You know, your grandfathers, if they're halfway decent men, your grandfathers, your uncles, all that, to mitigate. You know, if you run into issues with submission along the way, you should have already vetted this man to say, you know what, I trust his leadership. I know he's not going to have us submit to crack cocaine or nothing like. Oh, if I can't say that, sorry. I know he's going to have us going down the right path because he's been vetted by men I trust, men I look up to. You know, I know that they've okayed him, and I know they have my best interest at heart. So I know, even if that's not the best idea, he must got another, plan in the long run. I'm going to do my part. But if you don't vet that man, then you run the risk of submitting to a man you don't trust, and unfortunately, once you get married, you gotta kind of play your role. That's your job now. You should have did your due diligence, but that's all I have on it.
Thank you, Raven. Thank you very much. All right, so that brings me to our last topic. We're gonna go ahead and say bye to Mike. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your insight. Come back, okay?
Thank you, Mike. Nice to meet you. Yes. Come back, please.
All right. Have a good night. All right. So our last topic is how can we create, and I shouldn't have said create, I more so mean how can we foster or nurture healthy and happy children? What do you all think? Ready?
Yeah, no, I was saying that's why earlier I say Miss Jovanda, she started going into it. She was getting deep into it, like we need to raise. I'm like, that's for later. But yeah, I think it goes back to kind of what we touched on earlier when it comes down to being intentional, right? I think that our biggest problem is that sometimes when we're creating kids or whatever we're doing, like from the beginning, sometimes we're not very intentional in what we're doing. So we end up being very reactive and we raise our kids in a very reactive manner. So I feel like the first step and the first thing that you need to do is you have to be intentional about making sure that you are working on yourself, right? And doing the things that you need to do to address your childhood trauma, address generational curses, right? Address all of those things so that you don't put that back onto your kids. And I also think that it's important that you go to seek therapy when it comes to your kids too. Like we do like love languages with our partners, and we do all of this stuff trying to figure out, what kind of people our partners are and how we work together and how we do that. We don't do none of that with our kids. We don't even be knowing our kids half the time. Like we, like sometimes, if people ask somebody what their kid actually likes, right? Or things about their personality or their love languages and stuff like that, people won't even know a lot of the times, right? Because you see your kids sometimes as an extension of yourself instead of understanding that they're their own separate entity. And I know for me, is very important. Like I go to therapy with my son anyway. He's older. My daughter's only 4. But even with that, it's never too early to start, talking to people who are early childhood development, who are, all these things like, hey, how do I approach this topic? How should I talk to what should I do? You should be very intentional about it, because I like to say, because you also have to forgive yourself, because I like to say, we're going to jack those kids up. Just go ahead and let that go. You're going to jack a kid up. You're going to. You just want to try to mitigate it as much as you can. Like, because you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it 100% right. You're just not. So you want to just mitigate it as much as possible. But that's why I think it's important just to make sure that you are intentional in the things that you're doing with your children, that you are fostering an open, a situation where they're open and they're confident in who they are, and they're comfortable. They can come to you, they can talk to you. You're teaching them things you don't want the world to be out there teaching them. And that's why it's so important for them to feel comfortable and safe with having conversations. Like, even when it boils down to, I'm a strong advocate, for having sex talks with your children from a very young age. And I don't mean having freaking descriptive, in-depth conversations with like 3-year-olds. But I mean, like, even just identifying body parts, like all of these different things. We are very, just like you said, we have to think about how all of these threads come together to keep this cycle going. Because a lot of times we are uncomfortable with those things. So we never broach that topic with our kids, right? Ever. We don't ever talk to them about stuff. We don't ever talk to them about self-awareness in their body and different things like that. Like, I'm very adamant. Like, even like my daughter, like she's 4, right? A family member come over or something. If they want to hug her or something, she say no. I'd be like, no, she said no. She said no. No, respect her boundaries, right? It's just like stuff like that. Like, that's how you want to make your kids understand that it's a safe space. You want your kids to understand that they can come to you, they can tell you anything, and you want to make sure that you are figuring out who your child is, because your child is not you. Your child is not your other child. They're not some other child up the street. So you want to figure out how you should be engaging with that child. And a lot of times that does take stepping outside of yourself, doing your self work, and then getting professional assistance, because it's hard out here to be trying to raise these kids.
Yeah, thank you.
Listen. She ain't lying. It's hard.
Not one bit. She told the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I'm telling you,
Raven,
it's hard. It's hard.
I'm
Raven,
sorry?
do you have children? I don't know. Do you have children? No. She's like, oh no.
No, children are wonderful. And Cannon hit the nail on the head. We're taught when you work with children to address and like redirect. So what Cannon said is so important, because you're taught you need to validate those children's feelings. A lot of times kids feel like, well, the adult doesn't understand. Most of the time we understand. We know you still want to watch TV. We know you want to go outside. We know you're going through that. Mm-hmm. But as the caregiver, you need to say, I know you're feeling upset about this. I know you feel like I'm treating you wrong, but unfortunately, this is the time we have to do for this. And then it also ties into what we talked about with sexual liberation, because growing up, my mom was like, girl, there are going to be changes where it's going to make your body feel good, but you still need to use your logical sense, your values, your home training. Sex isn't bad. You're going to enjoy it, but for right now, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. And something we learned in school for dealing with kids was motivation is equal to value and effort. So like you said, Cannon, about being intentional, the effort you put into your children has to be intentional. You're going to have to intentionally choose to spend time with them. You're going to have to plan events. It can't just be, I threw a tablet to them, we're spending time together. No, you're going to have to talk to them, communicate with them, teach them, this is how we talk to each other. This is how we deal with emotions. And then lastly, you're going to have to provide them with solutions. It can't just be, go sit down, go do that. It needs to be, we're not jumping around right now. We're coloring, or we're doing puzzles, or we're doing books. But I know what you feel like you want to do, but that's not what we're doing, And so it gives them the space of, okay, well, she hear me, but she right. I probably need to be doing X, Y, and Z,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. I didn't ask if you had kids to negate any of your insight
No,
about this.
I didn't take it like that. No.
I just know you're married. So I was like, oh, I
relevant.
wonder if she has kids. I don't have any children. I'm a teacher though. So I know a little bit about children, okay? And my thoughts are that we have to teach our children, help our children make good decisions. When they can make good decisions, over time, they can live a happier life. We all know that. You make bad choices, you got bad outcomes. You make good choices, you get good outcomes. But we also have to embrace when they make mistakes, and just help them learn and grow from those mistakes, not make them feel less than. I think we have to empower our children as well. We can't just be dictators. We have to be firm, but allow them a space to use some of what you done taught them. Not just dictate every single thing about their life. I really think that because a lot of parents don't do that, and they spend most of their parenting dictating and putting limits and trying to be the boss and punishing. When their kid turns 18 and they get some liberty and some freedom, then they go buck wild because you haven't really taught them. You've just been controlling them, and you haven't allowed them the space to make some choices. So I think that's important. So, teaching them to make good choices, celebrating their good choices, but helping them learn from mistakes and not demeaning them when they make mistakes. I think it's also important to give them the opportunity to make those healthy choices, trying to show some trust, help letting them be leaders in some regards. And I also think it's important to expose children, expose children to different things. I wish in the Black community we did a better job at exposing our children. Now I know that there are some parents out there who are like, I know Cannon is, and I'm sure Javonda is as well. Expose your kids to things outside of what we normally do. Go bananas and Chuck E. Cheese, they're cool. And what else do these kids like to do? The usual is fine. Video games are fine. That's fine. But the world is so much bigger. And I think that kids, they need different outlets. Their kids are they have to be able to find their outlet. For some students, it's drawing, but who knows? Maybe for another student, it's playing the piano, or another child, it's playing the piano, or another child, it's building things. We got to expose them. I think that will help create happier children, giving them an outlet, it helps them build confidence and self-esteem. I think all those things are important. I also think that, how we talk to our children is so important. Language is important. If you are always yelling or get your bad self over here, or and nobody's perfect. I'm not a mom, so I'm not coming down hard on any mom or any father. Everybody makes mistakes, but we do have to be conscious of how we speak to our children. Like even me as a teacher, like I apologized to a girl yesterday or the day before. No, it was Friday. Because the day before she had done something that had irked me, and she does it all the time. And so I was kind of at my wit's end, but I think I came down real hard on it. And I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I'm not too much of an authority to say I'm sorry to the people that I'm leading, and I think that we have to do that. And just be conscious of our language, because the way we talk to children is how they will see themselves. The way we talk to them communicates to them how we see them. And kids care about how we see them. So if mama thinks, or auntie thinks, or sister thinks I'm just stupid, or I just ain't gonna ever do nothing right, or I'm just a bother, then they're going to internalize that. I've seen it, So I think our language is also important. and raising healthy and happy children.
Absolutely. I think too, teaching our kids to just be themselves. Just be your own person. My daughter is 9, she'll be 10 this month. Um, I didn't have my mom growing up when I was her age. Like I didn't have my mom around. You know, I knew my mom, but I refer to myself as a village woman, meaning that a lot of women in my family helped raise me. One of the biggest things that I think the biggest lesson that I missed as a kid was just learning how to be myself. It was so, it was following rules and I lived with a dictator. My grandma had like a whole, point system and just elaborate. You got to do what I tell you to do. That's just what you got to do. You'll understand it when you get later. Versus now with my daughter, I encourage her to be herself. Encourage her to find out what she likes, what she doesn't like. Cultivating and fostering different things that she wants to try, whether it's dance or piano or space camp or whatever her interests are at the moment. She's finding out who that little person who's going to develop into an adult, eventually who she is. And I think that's sometimes the part that we miss is accepting them and understanding who they are at their age and at their moment. Encouraging them to be themselves. Every morning she gets out the car, it's I love you, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. You don't have to follow nobody else at school. If you want to wear tie-dye over the uniform, let's go for it. If they allow it, let's go for it. If you want to wear mismatched socks, let's go for it. Um, what I just, I tell people all the time that I walked into parenting. Like I took a parenting class when I found out my daughter was coming. Like I was just like, I need to bone up on some stuff that they tell you, oh, it's gonna be natural. You're gonna know what to do. And I'm like, no. I need to know what to do in certain situations. So like basic childcare stuff. And even now it's okay, my mom didn't go over this with me. How do I handle this? So I think too, being honest with your child about things that you don't know. Like, well, mom doesn't know the answer to that question, or I don't know, but we're gonna find out. That's important too. You know, I think that if you encourage them to be themselves, be honest, they don't have to have all the answers. I think that will lead them to what kind of like what Tiffany and Nakia is saying in the comments, telling them to make good choices. You know, I think when they're comfortable about who they are, they're comfortable with, okay, I may not do this right, but at least I know mom and dad are here and they're not going to shun me for not being perfect, or they're not going to shun me for experimenting with something. They're here with open arms saying, okay, maybe you should have tried it this way, or maybe you should have tried it that way. So I think encouraging them to be themselves, and finding out who they are so that they can grow and cultivate that, I think that's important too. It's definitely a job. It's definitely hard. I know somebody put in the comments about these your broke best friends. They are little people who desperately need our guidance, um, desperately need our support. And even when they say they don't, they do. We're our child's like we that first go to person. So you know, so we definitely, and I like what you said, Ashley, about communication. I cannot stress that enough. We can't just assert authority. We got to do it in a way where they know we're in charge, but they know that we care. You know, you're not like in a prison.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts, ladies? Kudos to us. We finished our first show.
I like hanging out with y'all chicks, man. Y'all looking beautiful on camera today. People vibing in the comments.
Yes.
Everybody that called in. Yes.
Yes. Shout out. Thank you for everybody who stayed the whole almost 3 hours, called in. Thank you all. We'll be back every single Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So you all got to check us out. Make sure that you share this video as well and join us on Facebook. We're called The Ladies Room. And we love to hear from you all.
Yes, the
Absolutely.
conversations are gonna only get better.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. They're only gonna get better, more in depth, more. You're gonna hear more of this southern accent. You're gonna hear. You're gonna see some of this melanin on the screen. I'm
That's
excited.
why I'm
I
muted.
don't know about y'all. I'm excited. I'm excited.
All right. All right, everybody. Have a good night.
All right. Y'all have a great one. See y'all later.